Welcome to Hunt, Harvest, Health, the podcast with your host, Ryan Lampers, aka the StHealthy Hunter.
Howdy.
And myself, Dr. Hillary Lampers, where we share our love for ancestral living and the health topics of the modern age. Ryan is the well-rounded bearded brawn of Hunt, Harvest, Health. His knowledge of backcountry adventure, western hunting, and our household status as garden guru and super dad really defines our gut stealthy lifestyle.
And Doc Hillary is definitely the brains and beauty behind all of this. She kind of makes everything happen, as I have zero technical skills. Hill is just a wealth of knowledge in all things medicine and nutrition, which not only keep our family healthy, but they help me stay strong in all my mountain adventures.
You can follow us at huntharvesthealth.com, Instagram, and Facebook for more podcasts, recipes, and stories.
All right, let's do this. Howdy, folks. Welcome back. So what I thought would be fun this time of year, and what I was really looking forward to as this season wound down, was just kind of getting together with folks that have had time to get out and play this fall and spend some time in the woods and have some adventures. And I just really want to talk to guys that have stories, whether it's success stories or whatever. We all have, you come out of a hunting season, you all got these stories and you want to tell them and share them with people. And so I get to sit down with a buddy of mine, Jon Gabrio. Jon had a handful of tags this year and he was really excited. I talked to him quite a bit before the season, and he had just some phenomenal trips lined out. He had a goat hunt, he had a moose hunt with his father. As always, he has his whitetail hunt. He's a great whitetail hunter. I mean, this guy has killed a lot of big bucks in the mountains of Washington, just mountain whitetail in our home state, and he's done really well at it over the years and just had some great success. So I was hoping to get, kind of his thoughts on how his season progressed, and he's just going to kind of go through it. And it's a fun conversation. It's a long podcast. Jon is really good at telling stories, and he goes in real detail, and he's really, in depth as far as explaining every step of the way, which is super cool. So it is a long podcast, but I think it's kind of it's valuable. He kind of goes through his goat hunt, and how he got there and how that trip completely went, progressed and how it ended. And so I think it's pretty fascinating, especially if anybody is looking at doing a hunt like that. Yeah, so we just basically shoot stories back and forth off each other, and it was really fun for me to sit down with Jon and just hear his enthusiasm. I mean, he's got a lot of passion for what he does, and you can tell he really gets into it. And so hearing stories from guys like him is really it's fun for me, and hopefully it's it's something that everybody can get into and get something out of. But yeah, so here we go. All right. Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the Hunt, Harvest, Health podcast. Today, I am fortunate enough to be sitting down in the home of a Mr. Jon Gabrio. Jon, how you doing today?
Good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great. Wrapping up a hunting season, and tis the season to sit down and talk stories.
Yes, it is.
So, it's kind of why I'm here. I wanted to hear from a guy that's got a lot of stories, and you had some stories this year.
I might have had a couple, but not as many as you. Just trying to keep up with you. That's what everyone's trying to do nowadays, huh?
I don't know. You had some epic adventures. You had some hunts that I'm still waiting to do. So, first off, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. My name is Jon Gabrio, and I'm the owner of Apex Advertising. Do a lot of design work for the outdoor industry and websites, logos, and brochures and that type of thing. I've been doing it for about 8 years now, and I've had the fortunate chance to work with Ryan himself and a lot of guys like Phelps and Kifaru, Aaron, and Mountain Ops guys, and that type of thing. So and some other good people with Elk 101, with Corey Jacobson, and Cameron Haynes, and guys that really kind of help our industry.
You've got your finger in a lot of things out there,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, so it's been great. Can't complain. But I think the one thing I like most about it, is just being able to deal with people that are like-minded and enjoy what I love to do, which is hunt, and that's kind of been my passion since I was a little kid. So, it gives me the ability to do what I love, and then at the same time get to go out and hunt and share stories and see guys like yourself climbing up the side of a mountain. So, I mean, that was kind of funny, but yeah,
that is funny. We'll get into that for sure. What about, so where'd you come from? We're obviously here in Washington, my home state, both Washington guys, but,
I was born and raised actually in Auburn, just right up the road here. So I was just kind of stayed around the area my whole life, and then it was one of those things like kind of considered to move in Montana or Idaho or something like that. But of course, you got friends and family here, and makes it kind of tough to leave. So I ended up buying a house here in Bonnie Lake now, where I'm at. But I don't know. Montana's still not out of the picture. I'd love to move over there someday, but
we are like-minded then, because me and my wife are here as well. But we always talk about Montana, especially when we've, fresh off of coming back from Montana. Yeah, it's so hard to come back here and not want to just stay over there.
Yeah, I know that's my thing. It's like you go over there and it's like, man, I don't want to come back. And just I'd love to stay here and live here and just but.
This is where the money is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's, got to go and chase the money and, everything else. So
we hope someday you've made enough of it to end up to retire over there.
Exactly.
Still with enough time to climb those mountains and chase critters.
Yeah, because they don't seem very small over there. They just get bigger as the years go by.
Yeah, so. It's just, it's unbelievable country.
Yeah.
Both of us were fortunate enough to hunt over there this year as well. So
absolutely.
Well, yeah, we met a while back. I don't even remember where exactly we met, but I've seen you at some shoots, Mountain Challenge, and we kind of talked this year prior to, we both drew Washington Spring Bear Tag.
Yep.
And so we were kind of there at the same time.
Yep.
In fact, you saw me before I saw you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of funny. We had talked about, when we were both going down there, we were kind of going about the same weekend there to go and hike in, and we kind of told each other where our game plan was of where we were both thinking about going, so we didn't run into each other.
Yeah.
And our plan was, I went with Nick Schmidt there and his buddy Cody Shriver, and we had planned to go up a little higher and hit the snow line and hike in, and that all sounded fine and dandy until we got up there, and the snow line was a lot farther down than we thought it was.
Yeah.
So the hike in got a lot longer, but especially with brand new boots. But anyways, so then we came out and went down a little lower after we spent a day and a half in there and seen some bears, and we were sitting on this ridge glassing, and Nick looked across the ridge and was like, there's a guy sitting on a rock over there. And, of course, we're all throwing up our binos and spotters and everything and looking. And at the time, we didn't think about it, but here you are sitting on a rock and with your boots off, enjoying the sun. And so
it was hot out, and I had a brand new pair of leather boots. They were warm.
Yeah.
I was taking them off on occasion just to keep my feet from getting too sweaty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was down in that hole, I guess. It's funny because I got a text. I didn't get good service there, but I know once I got to the top, I got a text from Nick.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, Nick. And he's like, I can't remember what the text said exactly. It was something like, put your boots back on.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? What's that? I don't even know what that's about.
Yeah.
But I was reading it, and I had my boots off. Well, you guys were glassing from across the way. I think you guys didn't know who it was until you saw my hippie hair.
Yeah.
Probably blowing in the wind.
It was just luscious locks just blowing in the wind.
Yeah. Picturesque down there sitting on a rock. And I think put it together, that was me down there.
Yeah.
But that was funny. And then, of course, I'm paranoid. I got eyeballs up on the ridge watching me, watching my every move.
I think the dead giveaway for us was when you stood up and put your boots on, and you went up the hill at about Mach 5, and we realized that there was no one else in the Northwest that could cover so much ground, and we were like, "That's got to be Lampers." So
that was funny. That was a big mountain. That country, man. I mean, that's some not just steep, but the footing is bad. The rocks under the yellow grass.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, that was, ankle breakers. But yeah, steep mountains and just some of the coolest country you'll ever be in. And it's loaded with bears, fortunately.
Yeah. There are quite a few bears in there. I mean, you get in the right spot at the right time, and it almost seems like you got to shoo them off. It's you just, there's one, there's another, and it's kind of, one of those things that you're fortunate enough to be hunting in a good spot where you have to pick through a few, to really kind of maybe find one that you'd like to harvest, a big old boar.
Yeah, something special. That's the cool thing about it. You don't have to shoot the first one you see. Obviously, that was a spring hunt, so it was just mostly getting on those peaks and those glassing spots and glassing them up.
Yeah.
Finding them, seeing if it was worth going after and going for it. And hopefully you could get there before it gets dark.
Yeah, exactly. But covering that much ground, it makes it a little tough to cross some of those draws and get up there. But so we kind of had that, and then we left you. We went back home, and I think you stayed for a few more days after that, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
And then you ended up getting on or seeing. We had kind of both had intel of a big one that was running around in there. And
there was an absolute monster
right
there, just a giant bear, and that's the one I had in my sight. So that's the one I wanted. I was going for specifically. So
and you laid eyes on him?
I did.
Yeah, and never got the chance to pull the trigger.
Never got the chance. By the time I got there, he was a long ways off. He just disappeared on me into the timber and never to be seen again, unfortunately. But no, I spent some days in that area just hoping and praying that I was going to get that opportunity. It just never happened.
And that's part of hunting, I guess, and it was kind of one of those things. We had limped out of there a little because my feet were hurting pretty bad, but we got out of there and went back home, and you stayed. When you came back out, I got in touch with you and kind of seen what you'd seen, and you talked about that big bear, and it was kind of one of those things that got me charged back up. I just wanted to go marching back down there, but was kind of hoping the snow would melt a little more so we could get
for sure
into some of that higher end stuff.
Yeah. We kind of came at it in different directions. I came from the bottom, worked my way up, and you guys were kind of starting at the top and working your way down into those holes.
Yeah. And it seemed like at the time, because the season opens earlier, in April, and it seems like some of those gung-ho guys, they really get in the bottom, and they're doing really well in that bottom end.
Yep.
And then as the snow starts melting, those bears kind of follow that snow line up, and then that was our thought. We were trying to get up higher to catch them moving up.
Right.
And but it was kind of weird. It was like they were up there, but at the same time, there wasn't a lot of like green upper onions yet that were really popping, and we kind of had that like stall and it melting off.
Yeah, and there was definitely a level there where the onions were.
Yeah,
it seemed like at that time it was like mid-mountain. There was just piles of them, and then really just faded, nothing up top.
Yeah, and that was kind of what we had ran into, and so that's why we decided to wait a few more weeks, and then we wanted to try the other end of the unit and come in from the other side to just figuring that no one had been over there because of the snow.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of when we had kind of talked a little bit, waited a couple weeks, and we went back, and then I actually went with a different guy, James Kyrus, and Jim, and we had met and went in and had a plan to go out this ridge. Hiked, we drove in, realized that a week before we got an intel from a guy that told us where the snow line was. And it was kind of one of those things that, okay, well, we're going to try it, but I don't know if we're going to even be able to drive up to the top. And so we kind of risked it, and we're like, well, if we can't, we'll just spend 6 hours and drive clear back around the other side of the unit. And when we say 6 hours, that's not an exaggeration, because you got to go.
It's a long ways around.
Out and around and down that gravel road for 3 hours. So it's a long ways. And so we'd kind of made that game plan, went up, and fortunately we did hit a spot where there's some snow in the road, but we were able to get around it. And then ended up we hit a snow bank, and there was a little snow kind of coming across the road. And if I wasn't in a big Dodge diesel, where I'd probably, not ideal snow truck, I might have tried to drive through it and made it to the trailhead, but unfortunately we were about a mile and a half from the trailhead. So we stopped, parked, and hiked in, and then hit the trailhead and hiked out this ridge and down there a ways. And
I think that was a smart move on the Dodge Diesel thing.
Yeah.
I've made that mistake with mine too many times. Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't do good in the snow.
No. And we had hit a patch in the snow just before that, and a little bit, and there was about a 40-yard section of snow, and the front end of it was only about a foot deep, but down towards the other end it was about a foot and a half to 2 feet. And Jim was like, just put it to the floor, we'll make her through there. And I was thinking, but we're kind of going downhill, and I was like, yeah, all right. I'm like, but what are we going to do when we come back up?
Right.
And so that was kind of the scary part, it's like, we'll make her through because we're going downhill, but if this doesn't melt, how are we going to get back up through there? We're going to be digging. And so we had a shovel, but we made her. And then, but it was amazing because, so we hiked out there, and that evening, it was about midday. We got out there, it was about 11:30-ish, noon, set up our tent, found a really nice open ridge, good glassing points from, both sides, and we could hike up and down the ridge about half a mile and, glass. And there was some big, deep canyons, and then, some open hillside that we felt we could look at and glass pretty good. Not sure if we could necessarily shoot from the side we were on clear across, but we would figure out a way to either drop in the canyons or make it happen, which, as you know, over there seems like
in that country, yeah, that's the problem. It's like you see one and hopefully they're stuck on some onions or a patch of grass.
Yeah.
Because usually by the time you get there, if they're not, they're long gone.
Yeah, they are.
You see them cruising country.
Who knows where they're at?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those things. We get out there, well, we're sitting there, and of course, not thinking, we were thinking about waters. We were going out there, but it was our initial plan to camp was actually farther out, and there was a couple springs. Well, we had got to this spot, and we were like, well, let's set up here, and we'll go out and get water and come back, because this looked the most open that we could see. So we're sitting there. Jim went down, grabbed a little water. He actually was just diving over the hill, just trying to see what was going on, and he found some water just right over the hill, so that made it nice. And so I got the rest of the camp set up. Well, we sat down. It was one of those things where, like, oh yeah, let's take a nap. Well, it was like 90 degrees out, and Jim was smarter than I was, because Jim went and sat by a tree on the edge of the ridge, so the wind was coming up, and I was just tired because we had got up at midnight, drove, and then hiked in, so we really didn't have any sleep basically all night. And I tried to lay down in the tent. Well, anyone that knows anything about sun baking on a tent, it's
hot in there,
real hot real quick. And so I was sweating, and finally I was like, I can't take this. So I got up, went out, laid down on the ground over by him next to a different tree, and pretty quick, we looked at our watch, and it was like 1:30-ish, and we were like, instead of sitting here where we can't really necessarily see anything behind these couple trees, why don't we grab our stuff and just bail off, the ridge about 100 yards, and so we can actually glass.
Right.
So we go back up, get our stuff, hike down, and we're only 150 yards from the tent. I mean, we're, right on the tent, and sit down on the ground, kind of get our pads out and get everything set up and get the spotter out. Both of us glass across at this ridge, and it's one of those where it's kind of, the upper end is pretty grassy, and then it came down in some timber, and then it had the few openings in the timber, but it was that thick brush,
right,
that just notorious over there. You get in some of those draws, and it's just super thick. You can't see 5 feet. The brush is 10 feet tall, and it looks like it's a foot tall from when you're looking
where
over
you're
there.
glassing at.
Yeah. And it was kind of one of those things. We both sat down at the same time and looked, and it was just boom, bear. And, we're like, okay, there's one. Why weren't we sitting over here earlier, And so we were looking at this bear, and it was just a big jet black bear. And we're like, okay, cool, at least we got one. So then instantly we're both trying to figure out, how are we going to shoot this thing? Because it, as you said, it's clear across over there. We're at this point probably about 1,200 yards, which most guys, if they have one of those big long range cannons, they're probably just going to dial up and send one.
Sure.
And I don't, and I didn't really feel like, to me, I'm the type of hunter that I just want to try to get as close as I can. And one, to make a better shot, but two, that's part of it. Like, I just enjoy the stock, the experience, and, yeah, sure, these guns now you can shoot a long ways, but I enjoy the aspect of trying to get as close as I can.
Right.
And so, we dove off this hill, dropped about 1,000 feet vertically down into one of these canyons, and climbed out on this ridge, and there was a rock bluff that went out, and now we're looking across at the hillside. Well, the bear was down towards the bottom anyway, so it was kind of one of those perfect scenarios where we got out on this rock bluff, the bear was kind of straight across, and we ranged, and he was 578, and he was just sitting there. Well, we had spotted another bear, and so we realized, okay, there's a sow. He's on a sow. Well, as you know, when they're rutting, they're following those sows, so you got a pretty good chance that he's not going to move too far.
Sure, yeah.
It's like a deer or an elk. When they're in the rut, they're focused. And so we got set up, and the bear, he just kind of was sitting there, and got my pack ready, everything, totally perfect. And anyways, well, he kind of turned and started out, and he just stopped. Boom. And I shoot. Well, I hit like a foot over the top of his back. And, it was kind of one of those things where I didn't think. So I have a loophole scope with one of those CDS dials. Well, next to Jason Phelps' house out there in PL, they have a big gun range, and, it goes out to 550 yards. And I had sighted my gun in out there. Well, that CDS dial, I had sighted it in, not thinking, because Jason pretty much lives under sea level. I mean, he's in the water out there in PL.
Sure.
And so I had sighted my gun in at sea level. And so you go up in elevation, you're going to hit high, right? And so I dialed that dial in to 580, thinking I'll just hold right in the middle. Well, I hit like a foot high. Then it clicked.
Right.
Uh-oh. Like, I sighted this thing in at sea level. Now I'm at, 5,000 feet. We got a problem. And so the bear runs off. And, well, then all of a sudden, literally 45 seconds later, a minute later, he comes poking right back out in that same opening. And this time I ranged him again. He was 560. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll adjust it. So I put it at 550, took 10 yards off, thinking, okay, I was high, foot high. Take, 5 or 10 yards, we'll be good to go. Well, he comes out, and I don't know, what happened, just the shakes, I don't know. It's just, your adrenaline's going.
Sure.
And it happened so quick, and I sent one, and it hit literally like a foot in front of his nose. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. You could see dirt fly.
Oh, yeah.
And Jim, he's kind of back there, not laughing, but you could tell he was halfway laughing, And,
that's what buddies do.
Oh, yeah. You got to get that harassment in.
Sure.
And so the bear runs off. And now we haven't seen it. We sat there thinking, well, the sow was still there somewhere below, in the trees. So let's just, see what's going on. Well, I had wanted always to kill, like, a pure blonde bear. Well, anyways, so we're sitting there, and I was like, we got 3 days to make this happen. I'm not in a rush. This is the first afternoon, and we're seeing bear already. So as you know how it goes, we're sitting there. Well, all of a sudden, boom, she pops out and starts up the hill. Well, all of a sudden, here he comes, and right behind her. Well, they go in this clump of trees and literally sat there for like an hour and a half. And we could see them, but it was one of those things, they weren't moving. They were just kind of in some shade, hanging out, hotter than can be out.
Right.
And so Jim was like, well, we're sitting here, and it was like bacon. We're on a rock, so it's already sucking in heat. And then, here the sun's baking on us. We don't have sunscreen. We don't have anything. We're in the wide open. We didn't want to move in case they stepped out. So long story short, I think I ended up with literally a 3rd-degree sunburn, from that. But anyways, so then after about the hour and a half, the sow, we could tell she had no cubs. And she had this like look of she wasn't moving real good. You know, she just had like that kind of slow walk, the way she was moving, like she was older. Just, I don't know if she was hurting or, you know, what was going on. Something wasn't right. You know, it kind of had that feeling when you're watching her, and we both talked to each other. I mean, now we've seen him for, you know, 2.5 hours probably total. And we could tell there was no cubs anywhere around. And, you know, after watching her, it was just kind of like something, you just knew something wasn't right. Well, he comes out into this opening about 20 yards above her, and it's one of those things in that brush that it looked like it was wide open, but, you know, obviously it wasn't. And well, he stops, and right as I'm getting ready to shoot, I range him. He was 525. Couldn't get any closer. That was it. It was done. So I range him, get ready to shoot, and he squirts in behind some trees, and it was like, okay, well, now what? You know, like, it's, you know, she's still there. He's going to come out, but it was just getting thicker and thicker down that hillside. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if we're going to see him if he starts moving. And, well, then she steps right out in the opening right below him. And it was kind of like, he's like, there's your blonde bear. You know, and I'm like, yeah, I was like, but I don't really want to shoot a sow. You know, I was like, I want to kill a big boar. You know, that's what we're here for. But then, you know, we talked about it, and we'd been talking about it this whole time that, dude, she's hurting.
Something didn't look right.
Yes.
On her.
Yeah. And so it was kind of one of those things like, no cubs. Let's, you know, make the decision here. You know, should I shoot her? Because just to, you know, try and like help her out because, you know, something wasn't right. So, you know, we both kind of agreed, yeah, you know, there's no cubs, you know, just help her. So I dropped her right in her tracks. Cool. Everything was great, you know. So we're sitting there high-fiving, talking, you know, like, yeah, you know, and watching her to make sure she didn't move. And, well, the black one comes back in and walks right down to her, and he's sitting there like sniffing her and like swatting her. Like, get up, like, let's go, you know, and she's just out cold, and he's just sitting there just like swatting her. And I've never seen that in my life.
No.
And so we're through the spotting scope, like halfway trying to film with the phone scope and like taking pictures, and this bear's just like lost, like he didn't know what to do. And so it was kind of cool to see that. Well, every time as it happens, all of a sudden he takes off running. And, you know, so Jim and I are kind of looking at each other like, that was weird. Like, he literally just went flying. And we look up, and here steps out this just giant,
this big old slob of a bear.
Cinnamon-colored bear. And, you know, he wasn't 30 yards above where she was at. And so he had to be in the timber because there was a piece of open hillside about 100 yards wide on either side in a strip of timber that was like 50 yards wide. So he was in that timber the whole time, and they were down there, you know, doing their thing. Well, he steps out and comes right down to her and sniffs her and knew something, you know, obviously she wasn't moving, so he knew something wasn't right. And he takes off and went, you know, ran off. And Jim and I, it was kind of cool because it was one of those things like you're sitting there and you just see this like giant bear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that was what we came here to kill.
Right.
But we did a good thing because she wasn't, you know, doing very good. And so it's like we did a good thing, but at the same time, dang it, because that was what you were after. And, you know, I don't know how big, you know, of a bear. I mean, he was over 300 pounds for sure. I mean, just a giant, you know, big bear. And anyways, so he runs off. So this is where, as you know, things are never the same. And so we get down in the bottom of this canyon and start up the other side. Well, she died right next to this big old snag, and it was kind of an open, and so you can't miss it, right? Like, you know how you always do, and you're like looking over there, yep, that landmark.
Oh yeah, from across the canyon, it all is like, oh, that looks simple. I'll just look for that red snag right there, and I'll walk right up on it.
Done deal. And so
never happens that way.
No. So, you know, we get over on that hillside and do the old climbing through, and you realize that brush that looked a foot tall is like 10, 15 feet tall. And so we're climbing through like that mountain alder stuff and just bouncing over everything and like picking our way through. Well, we kind of go up and around her and then back down and then back over. And now we're in that meadow where we first saw him, and we're like, dude, okay, they're farther over here. Well, we see that snag. So we go over by the snag. Do you think we can find that bear? I mean, it was just one of those things. Like that brush was so tall, and from the other side, she was laying in the wide open.
Right.
But we up, down, around, so like 2.5 hours of searching a 50-yard circle, trying to recover, her.
Yeah.
And finally, I walked up on this like little knoll of grass, and she was literally like laying like right at my feet. And so it kind of made you feel good, like, okay, at least we found her, obviously. But at the same time, it was kind of one of those things that it turned into a nightmare.
No kidding. Yeah.
And so now we've been up forever. Now we got a bear on the ground. Now, trying to get it quartered and like everything in our packs and get back up to camp, because we got to go down back into the draw and climb 1,500 feet back up to the top of the ridge. And, we knew it was going to be a long night, but the bear, so she was just super old. Like we opened her mouth and she had no teeth. Like all of her teeth are gone, and just she had like no milk, like or anything. Like her nipples were just completely dry, and so it was kind of like one of those things that she wasn't gonna make it.
She wasn't gonna make it through that year, probably.
Yeah. It was. So I mean, I feel kind of good that we made the call, because those other bears looked a lot healthier than she did.
Sure.
And so it was kind of okay, but
sure. Yeah.
I hate shooting a sow. Would never recommend it to anyone, but in that circumstance, it was like,
yeah, it made sense.
Yeah, let's
for
do
sure.
it.
You want to get that mature animal.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I sent the teeth in. Well, teeth. There's one tooth, and I took it out, and it was coincidentally actually that behind the canine, that one they wanted.
Yeah.
But it was just a nub, and I kind of dug it out and sent it in. But I don't know if they're even going to be able to get any age off that or not.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if they do send it back and tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be good to know.
I took some pictures, obviously, of the bear, but of her mouth, and sent those in as well, so that way they could have evidence of like, hey, this is what I was working with, like, and there's not much, but I sent it to a couple guys who know bears, like Nick Hopkins. He owns Boar Masters out of Idaho there, and makes a lot of bear attractants, and I sent it to him, and he was thinking that she was 14 plus.
Holy smokes.
And so it was kind of cool to like think about, hey, I just shot a bear, that's lived
that long.
Yeah.
And
so he said he'd shot one a few years before that, was the same way, like no teeth, and it got a little one and got an age, and it was 14. So it was kind of cool. But
interesting.
Yeah,
that's one thing I've not done enough of, and that's age them. With teeth. You always got to send that tooth in, but I've never got reply to get that verified.
Sure.
You kind of just guess, right? You never really are sure.
Yeah.
And usually, we don't. It's similar to the weight thing. You don't really know how heavy your bear was,
right?
Because we always kill them in these areas where you're never going to get them on a scale. All you do is get the meat out and take that back. But sometimes it would be nice to know the age and the weight of a bear.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. It's tough. Like, you don't know, like you said, like how much that bear weighs.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I don't know. My pack's pretty heavy, but it is what it is.
I can curl this much, and this
it
sounds like a whole lot more.
Yeah, start grabbing hams. You can't lift them. So all right.
Yeah.
Cool. So
that was I think that was end of May, wasn't it?
That was actually in the
first
second
part of
weekend of June.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
we were similar. We were close on when we both killed our bears. As far as the time frame, kind of later in the season.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys, I think, had gone in early, like you mentioned, April 15th, and got their bears knocked out, and then in May.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what happened, because I think you and I we never seen another person.
No.
And so I think we were kind of the latest ones in there, but no one had been on that side of the unit because of the snow.
Yeah.
And so I remember we got out, and I texted you, and you were heading down or getting ready to head down or something in like the next day or so, because we only had like 5 days left of the season.
Yeah, it was down to the nitty gritty there.
Yeah,
right to the wire,
cutting her close.
Yeah,
and so then I think I had given you some intel.
Yep.
Trying to help you out where I saw that big one.
Yeah,
and then I don't remember what happened at that point. You'd went out there or something.
I bombed in there. It must have been a few days before, because I think the snow had melted a little bit more.
Yeah.
I went in there and checked out that area. I'm pretty sure I saw where you guys were. I wasn't exactly sure. Saw some good bears in there. Saw 2 different blonde, just completely blonde sows. Must be like a hotbed for blonde sows in there.
Yeah.
but ended up backing out. The weather got really bad. I got a bunch of fog roll in, and saw a really nice cougar. Came by me at 20 yards, hiking in there that first day, and saw good bears. But once that fog rolled in, there was not enough days to sit it out and wait for that weather to go away. So I ended up dropping down, way down in elevation to get out of that fog, and found a great spot, and ended up getting my bear down there. Just a really nice big old cinnamon boar.
Cool.
But yeah, that was a fun hunt. I hope to draw that tag again someday.
I know, me too.
It was pretty cool, just the country you're in, and yeah, it's just difficult to bomb around, but it's a fun hunt because of the numbers of bears that are in there, and you don't have to shoot the first one. You get to be picky and take what you want, or find a good mature bear. Whatever you're going for.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like you said, like our thing. Like when we had went over on our first trip, the first evening we saw 4 bears.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, oh man, things are looking up. We got 4 spotted. And we actually saw this sow with a little, tiny cub, and it was kind of cool. It started pouring rain, and she sat down on her hind legs and was just sitting like bears do, and she's kind of straight up, and this cub came in and just walked out and just sat down right in her lap, and so she's like holding it with her front legs.
Oh yeah.
And Nick took some pictures of it, and it was kind of cool to just see a mom taking care of her little cub like that, and just watching it. But yeah, we'd seen 4, and then when we went back, or I can't remember, we seen another one the other day when we saw you. I'd have to talk to Nick. I don't think we did see anything, but we went back in, and when I ended up killing, so we saw those 3 bears literally in like 2.5, 3 hours there. Well, then we get over there and we're getting my bear, and look back on the rock that I shot from, and literally right below the rock where I shot from, like another cinnamon colored bear walked out and walked right under that rock.
Jeez.
And so it was kind of cool. It was like we saw 4 bears in like 4 hours, and it was like, hey, this worked out pretty good,
Pretty good little zone right there.
Yeah.
For
And so
sure.
It is kind of amazing though. Like a lot of guys wouldn't think about how many bear are truly kind of running around,
Oh yeah. You get in those mountains a little bit later in the season, summer, and you don't see nearly as many as you see at that time of year. But yeah, there's a pile of bears in there.
Yeah.
There's good elk numbers in there too.
Yeah,
so
I was gonna say
keeps them that keeps them fat and happy.
Keeps them happy. But yeah, that obviously is a spot where I'd love to go in and hunt some bulls, but it seems like drawing a tag is
tough. Yeah, I know. Once in my lifetime, I'd like to draw a tag in there. I'm not counting on it.
Yeah.
I'll just keep hunting other spots and hope for the best. But someday, hopefully.
I'm with you.
But so that was springtime. Shoot, we did that, and then I think I know my next hunt. I was down in Nevada chasing muleys, but I think you were telling me about a hunt you had for goats.
Yep.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so at that time, you were going to Nevada for muleys, and I'd had this hunt for mountain goats up in northern BC, so it was, kind of by the Yukon. It wasn't just in BC. We were up there a ways, and I had that hunt planned for kind of about a year and a half, and the outfitter I went with, North River Outfitting, Ron Nemechek and Maria Origoni, I'll probably pronounce that wrong, but they... I had actually worked on a website for them and did a bunch of stuff for them, and it was kind of one of those things that I'd always wanted to chase goats, and so mountain goats.
So you'd never hunted goats before? Never have?
Never.
Probably putting in like I am here in Washington, and someday maybe.
Hopefully, who knows? It's like I have 19 points, and it's kind of one of those things. I'm like, I just write that off. I'll
never get it. Yeah, I'm with you. Goats is one of those bucket list animals for me. Obviously I put in for moose, sheep, goat, like everybody else is in their home state.
Yeah.
Don't expect to draw it, but something about goats, I've always wanted to go chase them, and I just hope to someday. BC might be my only option.
Yeah.
If I don't ever draw here.
Yeah, you got to at least get up there and chase them somehow. And that was my feeling. Was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to draw a tag here in Washington.
Right.
And so backing up to that story a little bit about it. So my dad, that was like his favorite animal to chase, hands down, was a goat. And he grew up in Enumclaw here and always spent a ton of time up by Crystal Mountain and Crowell Pass and all that area up there back in the day, which that all burned up this summer, unfortunately. But he had chased goats around up there. So between himself, his stepdad, and his hunting partner, they had drawn 11 goat tags here in Washington.
Whoa.
And so it was kind of cool to, for him, he loved to chase them. They drew all those tags.
So how old is he now?
My dad just turned 70 this year.
And when was he hunting all those? When was that?
Back in like the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
Yeah. So before we went to our once in a lifetime draw,
Right.
Yep. And but at that time too, it's kind of one of those things that compounds were kind of just coming on the market, but they weren't a big thing. And so my dad always shot a recurve. Well, he shoots one and then went out and hunted his first time with a recurve, didn't get one, and drew again a few years later. And so that time he was like, all right, I'm getting one with my recurve now, like I'm getting one with my recurve, like I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so they go in, and he goes in during the summer and like packed in all this water, and he had these like canteens and just a bunch of them. So he and his buddy,
I remember the canteens.
Yeah,
we used to hunt with canteens.
Yeah, now who does
young guys don't even know what a canteen is, probably.
Yeah, my dad
or
has
a Bodo bag or anything like leather pouch bag that you put under your arm.
Yeah, I never even had to hunt with that stuff, So my dad back in the day, like I see going through his hunting boxes at the house, I'm like, what are these, And
yeah, big funny. Old clunky canteens.
Yeah,
metal things you hang around your neck, under your arm.
Yep. And so they're using the old metal pack frame, and they packed a bunch in during the summer. Well, they'd found this spot where they wanted to camp and put it under all these limbs and stashed them and buried them all over. So they come in to hunt, and the weather just got real nasty, snowy, and like in September even, when it was fogged in and everything, and just not ideal conditions. But that's part of hunting the mountains. And back then, they don't have the gear that we have now.
Right.
And so
they were tougher back then. We're a bunch of kind of, I don't know. We're just soft now.
I know we
compared to those guys back then. What they had to use, the gear they had to use, compared to what we get to use, and we're still complaining.
I know we are. I mean, for sure. Yeah, and so it was kind of funny. And so they get in there. Well, there was a dude camped in their spot, and somebody was like, "Oh, great! Here's this spot. We've been here all summer. They had this clump of trees up on top of this ridge, and like." Had made a camping spot inside of them, and they had little ropes tied for their tarp and everything to go over their tent and like create a wind shelter. And dude, I mean, like first class. Well, this dude's in there, so they get in there and they're like, hey, sorry, we built this thing during the summer. Well, this guy is like on the edge of hypothermia, like he's gonna die. And so my dad was kind of like, man, have you ever done this before? Are you ready to hunt goats, or anything? And like this guy had just drawn this goat tag first time, like didn't know what he was getting into. Hiked up, just happened to find the spot and threw up his tent. Well, long story short, the dude's like shaking. So my dad, they get their stuff set up next to that area and built a big fire and like tried to get the guy like warmed up and gave him some clothes and, trying to get him help back. Well, pretty quick, the guy's like, yeah, I don't have any water, I'm out. And so my dad and his buddy go and they just start pulling these canteens out from all of these trees. And this dude's sitting here and he'd been there for a day and had no water. And so he was
he was surrounded by full canteens. He just didn't know it.
Yeah, everywhere. And so it was kind of funny because it was one of those things that, here he could have had all the water in the world that he needed. So my dad, they make him some coffee and get him, pulled back to reality. Well, the dude leaves. Long story short, ends up killing him with his recurve. And, so at that point, it's like to him, like, hey, I did it,
Yeah.
And a couple other guys he knew had drawn some goat tags over the next few years, and they always went up there and killed goats, but they were never really trophy hunting goats. It was just kind of one of those things, like, hey, we seen white hair, knew it was a nicer goat, but not, a nanny or a kid, something small. They were always after trying to shoot billies, and shot them. So, anyways. I had heard these stories as a kid, and I'm like, man, once I started hunting, I got to hunt goats, and I always had this dream of being able to hunt goats with my dad. It was like, he loved it so much, and he'd just go up and spend the summers up here in next to Crystal Mountain up there and above Enumclaw and just glass goats. I mean, he didn't care. It was like most guys, you know, some guys go glass mule deer and elk, and no, like my dad,
that was his thing.
He'd sit there on the highway, and like anywhere he went, he'd drive over Snoqualmie Pass and look at those rocks. He'd park on the edge of the highway and just glass for goats. And so, like, to me, I was always just, I got to get a goat tag. I got to get a goat tag. Well, so then this opportunity came up. I was able to go. Well, I was really hoping, you know, I was like, man, I would love nothing more for my dad to go. But the country up there is just, it's rugged and it's gnarly, and it's not like the stuff here. Sure. And so, I mean, here there's timber patches in the rocks and where the goats are living, so you can kind of make your way.
Yeah, we've got a lot of goats.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of areas where the goats are that aren't too tough.
Right.
It's not your classic hardcore goat country.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's elk running around in some of it.
Yeah, but it's not the terrain that maybe British Columbia has.
Exactly. And so it was kind of one of those things that, you know, hey, as much as I'd love for him to go up there, you know, and so his birthday was in the end of August 28th. Like, my dad was turning 70, and, you know, it was kind of one of those things. I just knew probably wasn't his cards to be able to go up and hike around. So he was like, hey, you know what? You go, enjoy it, and I want to hear the stories when you get back. Well, so the thing is like my goat hunt actually fell on his 70th birthday. And so the outfitter, I was supposed to go up there around the 27th, I think is when I was supposed to get there and then fly in. And so they asked me a few days prior, and that was like a Tuesday. So it was like that week before, they were like, hey, do you want to come up a few days early? I'm like, well, yeah, shoot, heck, I'll drive up there. And so I was driving. So a lot of people they drive up to Smithers, and then they fly in on a big one of those. It's a wheel plane, but it's like a bigger one. Well, I forgot what they called it, but it's like a beaver, but bigger.
Okay. Otter?
An otter, maybe, yeah. And so it was pretty big, though. So everyone flies in from there, and they actually have an airstrip built out in the middle of nowhere at their like lodge.
Okay.
And so everyone was supposed to fly in. Well, I drove clear up to this town of Tatoga Lake, and I'm telling you, like, it's on the Cassiar Highway, and you're headed to the Yukon, and basically you leave Smithers and start up there, and it turns into that, oh, next fuel is, you know, 180 kilometers. And so, you know, at the time I'm thinking, better make sure the tank's topped off, you know. And there was literally no towns, no nothing. It's just you're driving, and
got to be a pretty cool drive, right?
It was. And so, and the thing that threw me off, you know, is like everything's in kilometers up there. And so, like, when I first got into Canada, it was actually kind of funny. I text Jason and Charlie, and I was like, guys, you're not going to believe this. I was like, dude, diesel up here, it's like it was like 97 cents or something. Like, I had figured it out after the conversion. Well, not thinking that it was in liters and not gallons. Right. And so I like pull into the gas station while I fill up, and I'm like, dude, this isn't adding up right. So it just keeps like filling and filling and filling. And I look, and it's like $80-something. And I was like, well, that seems about what it should be. But then I like calculated it out, and I was like, dude, it's like $3.30 a gallon, you know, like, and not thinking it was in liters. Well, anyways, so the kilometers kept throwing me off like the whole way. Well, I drive clear up there, and it's like 330 some miles from like Smithers up to this Tatoga Lake. And I'm telling you, if you've never been on the Cassiar Highway, there is nothing there, but it's really cool because there's bears everywhere. Okay. And so there's like, I'll be driving down the road, black bear. Oh, a little more, another black bear. I mean, they're just kind of like lining the highway.
Just feeding on the grass alongside it.
Yeah, just eating that grass. And so that was kind of cool to just go up and just see the road trip itself. So it was 21 hours from my house up there. And so, you know, just to see everything along the way. And so I make it to Tatoga, and Ron and Marie actually have a cabin there, and I stayed in their cabin. Well, that night I met my guide, Thomas, and so Thomas and I got a chance. Well, I didn't know he was going to be my guide at the time. They said a guide was flying in on my flight the next morning on a little float plane, and he was flying in with me. I just thought at the time, like, hey, yeah, whatever. Well, so we ended up hanging out that night, wake up next morning, go down to the dock. Well, up there, like, no one's on like, a standard time, like, hey, we're leaving at 9, and so it's kind of one of those things like, dude, I'm chomping at the bit, I just want to get up and I want to go hunt. And so all of a sudden we're sitting there and, it's like 8:45 in the morning. And there's a little restaurant there at this resort. And I say resort, this thing is tiny. Okay, there's like a little restaurant that can hold about 15 people. And then one of those things where you could fill up with gas, but it's in like one of those big white tanks that, there's one nozzle and
Sure.
you like pump it and like turn a handle and like actually pump it yourself. And so it was kind of cool to see like something like that out in the middle of nowhere, because you just feel like, man, I am so far away from civilization that
technology hasn't gotten there yet.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it felt pretty cool. And so guys actually sit at this place and they can like glass up sheep from the lodge. And so like, I'm like stone sheep just running around all over the mountains. And there's like this wall of arrows in this lodge from guys who have killed them with their bow around the area there. Well, I start looking through the arrows and it's like Adam Foss and Dustin Rowe and like those guys, like guys that like I know who they are, and like Dustin I work with quite a bit on his projects and his websites and that type of thing. And so I was like, man, Dustin's arrow, and so it was,
So what do they do? Are they just leaving the used arrow, writing their name on it?
Yeah, so they have like a little tag and they like tape it to these arrows.
Yeah.
And so it says like what year and then how far the shot if they knew, and then how big their stone sheep was.
Oh, no kidding.
And so it's like cool. I took pictures of it and there's like just a wall of arrows. And there's probably, I don't know, it went back to like the 90s. And so there's like guys back in the day shooting those old Easton Game Getter big aluminum arrows. Yeah.
Heavies.
And so it was kind of cool to see that and the progression of arrows that went down to like, today's technology of small carbon arrows. And anyways, so we get down, get on this float plane, and we end up flying in. And so to start this whole thing, the weather is perfect. It rained a little on my way up, but that morning it was just crystal blue skies and it was kind of cold, frosty on the ground, but just like absolutely perfect. And it was kind of one of those things, like I had this vision the whole time of going on this hunt. I'm going to spend, 5 days in the tent because of weather.
Sure.
And, the typical...
Just the nightmare scenarios that could happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you see, it seems like these guys in the north, it's like, that's what happens. Like everyone goes up there sheep hunting or goat hunting or moose. And it's like, dude, they spend, 5 days in the tent and then hunt for 2-3 days,
Well, that's a great way to look at it though. It's always good to expect the worst and not the other way around, right?
Yeah. At least I was being a little bit of a realist or thinking that,
Yeah.
And so it was kind of, that's what I had just already made up in my mind was going to happen. So we fly in and we're 100 miles from like the middle of nowhere. And we come over this mountain and I look down and there's the Stikine River and it's just wrapping around through the trees. And then all of a sudden, like, here's this lodge on the end of the edge of this river. And I was like, dude, this is too good to be true. It was just kind of like one of those things that should be in a movie or a painting or like it's made up. Like this isn't real. And it took me a second to kind of realize like, dude, people actually got this wood out here, made this lodge and have that cool of a setup, and they live there all summer.
They get to see it every day.
And they see it every day, and they guide hunters and so it was kind of just one of those things that it was just surreal. So we swoop down and we land on the river, and Ron and Maria and a bunch of guides and like helping hands came out and like they're helping you get all your stuff off the plane and take you inside. And it was kind of one of those things I was like, dude, this is crazy. And
the weather was good.
Yeah, dude, just blue skies. Perfect. And so I go in, and of course I'm thinking, I'm just going to be at this lodge for like a day before I'm going to go out and hunt, And so it was kind of one of those things that it was like, all right, I'm going to hang out here for a little bit and just relax. So I go in, freaking kick my boots off, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, some cookies. No. They had different like plans, but I'd never done anything.
Slap that cookie out of your hand.
Oh yeah, real fast. Yeah, it was like get your gun, get your bow, And so I had all intentions of bow hunting this thing.
Yeah.
And so Ron he came in and asked me, he's like, hey, do you want to kill a big goat, or do you just you want to hunt like nice goats, it's kind of one of those things like, well, of course I want to kill a big goat. Like who doesn't, And so it was like, well, I got a spot that we haven't been to in like 7 years. And so I was like, sounds good to me. Let's go there.
That's every hunter's dream hearing those words.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, yep, well, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
So I go out, make sure my gun is still sight in, shot some rounds, everything was good. And then go back in. Well, I'm thinking still at this point, it was about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So I was kind of thinking, all right, I'm going to still hang out. We're not getting out today. And so some other hunters had been flown in. They were before I got up there, it was a bunch of sheep hunters, stone sheep hunters had been there since the end of July through this point. And so all these stone hunters were kind of coming in and out, and it was kind of cool to see some of that. And anyway, so Ron, all of a sudden they're like, get your stuff, we're going. Like, oh, all right. So, of course, I'm like trying to change and grab all my stuff. I don't know what I'm taking because I don't know. So I'm the type of person, and Nick and Charlie, anyone, Phelps, they'll tell you, I'm the overpacker of the group.
Okay.
And so, like, when we go hunting, dude, I have all my meals laid out in, like, Ziplocs, with, like, I know how many calories in there. I know food I'm eating for breakfast, every snack, everything. They tell me I stop and eat too much, but I tell them it's hard to keep a good fuel machine running. So, like, that's my excuse. But anyways, so I got all my stuff. Well, I brought all my own Mountain House meals, everything. Like, I flew in there thinking, I'm bringing all my stuff, all my own food. I didn't want to depend on anyone to get me something, or especially if I didn't want to eat it. It's like we kind of know what we like to eat, and I didn't want to not want to eat what they brought. So I had all my stuff. Well, so Ron's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I got to get, I need my
food ready.
Yeah. And so I had all the Ziplocs done, but I was trying to figure out what I was doing for Mountain Houses. He's like, we provide all the food for you. And I'm like, well, I don't do this guided hunt stuff. I'm like, it's not my gig. I was like, dude, I'm just a regular over-the-counter guy in every state that I hunt,
Yeah.
And so anyways, we get all of our stuff together, and we go out and get in the plane. And so it was kind of one thing I did learn. If anyone that goes on a guided hunt like that and they're doing any of the float plane stuff, they have a wind speed indicator that's right on the front of their wing, and it's a tube that's like an inch long that sticks out, and it's got a little cap, and this thing is tiny. Well, I walk up and like put my hand on like the rail of the wing, and it's right next to that wind speed indicator. And Ron like freaks out. He's like, whoa, stop, move your hand. Like, don't touch, watch my, and so he's like just freaking out. Well, it caught me off guard because I'm not used to that stuff, I don't do this. And so it was kind of funny. So I just backed away from the plane. I was like, dude, I'm good. So anyways, so we get the stuff in the plane. When we get off, we take off. And Ron it's kind of one of those things that it's like he's used to flying in the mountains up there, and and it's pretty drafty, and and it's just a 2-seater plane, like him and me, so it's a small plane, and he's used to all those drafts and upwind,
kicking you around a little bit when you go up and over the top and drop in,
exactly, and all that, and I'm not, and I hate like roller coasters and stuff, and so for me it was kind of like, dude, the plane's up and down, I'm like, I just hope I don't get sick,
yeah,
and so we come like over this ridge, and there's some stones bedded on this ridge, and dude, this one ram was just a stud. And Ron, he like goes over and he's like, oh, you see those sheep? And I'm like looking, I'm like, dude, I don't see them. It's one of those things like you just get, like I could pick an elk or a deer out, or something down here, but it's like you get up there and that it's just you got to like accustom your eye to
get your game eyes for that area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it took me a second. Well, finally we spot him. Well, Ron's like, you want to go see him? And I'm like, no, I'm good, because I knew what was coming. And so
it's never a good sign when the pilot asks you want to go check it out.
Yeah, exactly. And so all of a sudden he just drops down. And so he starts around and just, banking hard. And I'm just sitting there like eyes closed, like thinking I'm going to pass out, and it was kind of one of those things. And well, we fly over him, and it's not like we were like right on top of him or anything, but like enough to where I could see him, It was like, okay, hey, yeah, like I see some sheep. And so I felt like, it was like we were going to fly in the side of the mountain, though, because it was scaring me,
Right. You have no idea how hard those planes can bank and cut.
Exactly. And so it scared me a little bit. Well, so we take off and fly, and we keep flying. Now, of course, I have no idea where we're going because well, they won't tell you, but two, like, he knows, and it just felt like every mountain looked the same,
right.
and it's just those big, steep knife back ridges with just shale rock everywhere. And we come through this pass, and we're going like, there's just this huge like ravine that went down, and on both sides it's just like steep rock like faces. And I look out the window to my left, and there's goats standing like eye level with the plane, at
No way.
and we're about, I don't know, out each side of the wing. It felt like it was like 15 feet because, we're flying through this valley, but I'm sure it was more like 100 yards, 80 to 100 yards. Sure. And so I'm like looking at these goats, and he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, I was like, that's, pretty cool. I was like, are we hunting around here? And he's like, no, not really. Those are just some resident goats. And so he's kind of just showing me, some country. So I was kind of on an adventure plane ride for a second. Well, pretty quick he goes, hey, he's like, buckle up. I'm like, dude, I'm buckled. Like, we're good. He's like, no, like, make sure your seatbelt's tight. All right.
Oh, no.
And so, of course, I'm thinking here.
That's really not a good sign.
Yeah, I'm like, round two, Well, we go through this like little pass, and it just, all of a sudden, he's like, we're going to land on the other side of it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we go through this pass, and he just like pretty much cuts the engine. Well, like a duck, if they're coming in, they can like tip their wings, kind of straight up and down so they'll fall. And so that's what he does. And then we just start like falling out of the air, and I am freaking out, like I was trying to film this, but I couldn't because I felt like I was going to throw up.
Right.
And so we dropped like 2,000 feet in seconds. I mean, just diving. Well, then he just kicks the motor back up and levels wings, and boom, we land on this lake. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I've had about enough. I'm ready to go home, And so it was one of those things that it just seemed like, this was,
yeah, something you're not used to, first off. And I mean, if you haven't done a lot of flying, or they can turn you green pretty fast.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think they know that. I think they kind of mess with you a little bit.
I feel like they like got to push it.
Yeah.
It's like, they're
just going to show you how weak you are and how tough they are.
Exactly. And so it was kind of cool to experience that in a way. So we land, and he had flown my guide, Thomas, that I'd ended up hanging out with the night before. He flew him in first, and my packer, they give you a packer too. And so I'm thinking at this point, I'm like, dude, a guide and a packer. I'm like, I don't need any of that. Just put me out here. I just want to hunt goats, like I just want to do this on my own type of thing. And, but up there you have to have a guide.
Sure.
And so I'm thinking, I don't want them packing. Like, I want to pack my own goat, like because I wanted to do as much as this as I could the way that my dad did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways, so that night we get all settled in and everything. And we're down in kind of this valley, and I'm looking up, and I just at these rock walls, and I'm like, how am I going to climb this? Because you're going to need like ropes, and like once you get up there, you're going to have to rappel off the side type of stuff. I mean, this is big country. And so Thomas is like, yeah, we're going to climb up to the top of this mountain. And I'm thinking, all right, like, yeah.
So are there like scree fields like around, or is it pretty much just sheer hard rock?
Yeah, so there's a few, but that's the thing. So like Ron had told me, he's like, if I wanted to bow hunt, he'd have to take me somewhere else where there was more like big boulder fields and that type of thing.
Right.
But if hunting this spot, I'd have to take a rifle because it literally was just so straight up and down. And these goats live up in those big rock faces that he's like, you're not getting close enough with a bow. He's like, because if you come over the top, he's like, it's going to be 100 yards plus straight down before you'll get to where the goats are living. Right. And he's like, you can't come up from underneath of them. So he's like, you're just not shooting it with a bow. And so that was part of the thing with taking the gun. But the other thing is, so this one spot, it was kind of a boulder field-ish, and then you get up towards the top of it though, and I mean, it just all of a sudden it's just straight rock face. But it's weird. It's like those goats walk on that stuff like,
oh, it's unreal. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I know. I'm like, how do they do that? It just makes zero sense on how they don't fall off.
Yeah,
or if they do, it seems like
it seems like this shit every time they go up there. But
yeah,
it's like a very fluky thing when they actually do fall off and lose their balance.
Exactly. And so we end up climbing up this thing. And I mean, there's a couple spots that we went through, like some rock chutes climbing. And I don't know how far we actually climbed, probably, 2,500 feet, but like just straight up type of thing, and it was a ways. So we get up there, and there was a couple chutes that we went through, and it was like hand my gun up type of thing, and like one guy first and the next guy like grab your hand and like pull you up, and like we kind of altered getting up there. Well, we get set up on top of this thing, and this whole time it's just like bluebird skies, and I'm thinking, dude, like I might actually get a chance to hunt, you know? And so it was kind of cool to...
Now, how many days had you allotted yourself for this?
10.
10 days.
Yeah. So I had a long time, you know, I was like, I'm not in a hurry to you know, kill one. Like I'm
expecting weather, you know,
yeah,
like you said.
Exactly. So I'm thinking sit in the tent for 5, I might hunt for 5, you know, and or combination thereof. And so we're sitting on this big rock outcropping, and I'm looking down in this valley, and it was just kind of one of those things that it was kind of like hit me that I was actually there. Like I'm getting ready I'm going to hunt some goats. Well, of course, as we always think, there should be goats standing everywhere, and there's no goats. And you're like, how could there not be goats here? You know, we just saw some like back over there, you know, this ridge a ways, and you know, it just you don't think goats can hide. You know, it just looks like if they're there, you're going to see them.
Right. White on rock backdrop.
Yeah. It's like you can't miss them. So we're sitting up there. Well, I'll tell you right now, the wind up there is like, even though it's bluebird, the wind still blows like 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. So you're sitting there and it's just howling. And so I pulled out my puffy jacket, put it on, you know, and just trying to keep my warm, you know. It seemed like I should be warm, but the
wind was cutting through it. Yeah, for sure.
And so anyways, we sit there for a few, and we were glassing, didn't see anything, and we decided that we were gonna, you know, hike back down to camp for the evening and just make some dinner and go to bed. Get up tomorrow, we'll check it out. Well, so we get back down to camp, and we literally had like 45 minutes of daylight left, not much, and we start kind of just getting our mountain houses together and everything and boiling some water. And Thomas looks up across this canyon way up in this draw, and all of a sudden he's like, there's some goats. And you know, it's kind of one of those things I'm like, like don't see them, but yeah, you know. So finally I grabbed my binoculars, because he was seeing them with the naked eye, and I, you know, it was one of those things like I couldn't. So I get my binoculars, look, boom, here come these 3 goats piling over the ridge, and it was a nanny and a kid, and like another just yearling, couldn't tell what it was. And well, they feed down, and they start feeding right towards our tents. And I mean, when I say they're like a ways off, they're a long ways off. And they work their way all the way right down. And I'm thinking it's going to take them hours. Yeah. And goats kind of, when they're coming for water, like they fly off the hill. And so they came flying right down into this meadow and like heading right for us. And I'm like, dude, that's kind of cool. You know, like we're seeing some goats now, you know. And then they turn and walked off kind of down this big draw, this big valley, like headed down. I don't know where they were going, but they were heading down. Well, then we're looking up this draw and up on that huge rock face, and all of a sudden here's a goat standing right out in the middle of it. And you're like, how did we not see that thing from being up on top and, you know, just popping out of the woodwork? Well, we get the spotter out and get it on him, and you could just tell instantly, like, dude, this is just a big goat. And so just huge body, big swayed back, and a lot of those like bigger billies will get a big sway in their back, and they're kind of more yellowish. Like the other goats are like white, but the big billies are kind of yellow. And anyways, so we're looking at this goat. Well, then another one comes out behind it, and they're about 200 yards apart, and we're looking at that one, and it was kind of like, dude, that's a good goat too. But you could tell he's a little younger, but I think he actually might have had a little longer horns, because his horns kind of just, they swept back pretty good. And so we're looking at these 2 goats, and of course it's getting kind of dark, and well, they start feeding down the hill, and it was like one of those things, like Thomas is like, dude, you want to go after him? And I'm like, we have like 15 minutes, you know. And it was like, I was like, no, you know, we should probably just go in the morning. They're there, they'll be around. Well, I didn't know that because I haven't really hunted goats much, but goats don't just stay there, you know, like they move. And so we went to bed, wake up next morning. I don't think I really slept at all, because I'm just dreaming about goats now. Wake up. Well, the guide's supposed to get up, and the packer, and make your coffee and your breakfast and everything. Dude, I'm like up, I'm making my coffee, And I get everything, and like all of a sudden I'm like over at their tent, like, hey guys, like, you up? And so they're what, they're kind of getting up. It was kind of one of those things. It's kind of funny. I'm like, all my breakfast, everything,
Sure.
and they're like, oh, what do you want for breakfast? I ate it. And so,
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I'm ready. And so it's just kind of weird because when you're used to hunting with guys that usually hunt with like Phelps and those guys, they give me a bad time because they tell me I have to get up a half hour before them to eat. But I'm like, dude, I have to eat in the morning. Like, if I don't eat in the morning, like,
does Jason not eat in the morning?
Dude, I swear, like, the guy's like a rabbit. Like, he just nibbles, and it's just like a little bit of like a granola bar or something. And so, and Nick's the same way. Like when we were hunting Idaho a couple years ago, and literally, dude, we're up and I'm making my breakfast, everything. They get out of bed 20, 30 minutes after I do, and they're up and ready. I don't know how they get dressed so fast. Like, they are up and they're ready to go, and I'm sitting over here like, I'm ready, but like, I'm halfway ready, because I'm thinking we still got a lot of time.
Sure.
And so I'm kind of eating and whatever. Well, anyways, so back to the goats. So I get all my stuff, and it starts getting daylight, and I'm thinking, we should be hiking. That's just what we usually do. It's like, it's getting daylight, you're hiking somewhere.
Sure.
And they're kind of more in the, let's just sit here and let's glass first, Well, so we glass back up, and I'm expecting to see those two goats still up on that hillside. Dude, they're not there.
You're right.
And so it's like, all right, well, now what? Well, so we look down the canyon, and like a mile and a half away, and you can see like a white speck, like way up at the very top. And it was kind of one of those things like, I don't know how you're going to get to him. And if you do, you're going to shoot him, and he's going to fall like 1,500, 2,000 feet. And so it's like, you're going to have a busted up goat. And so we spot this goat, and we were like, yeah, that's got to be that same big one from last night. And so we take off down this canyon, headed that way, and glass him up, and we're looking, and yeah, it's a big goat. I mean, we could just tell, and we're like, all right, perfect, we're on him. Well, as hunting goes, you make this game plan. So we're going to hike like another mile down the end of this canyon and go up around the backside and come up over the top and try to shoot him, or hopefully
get above him
and shoot him, and hope that he was in a spot that he would just stay, or like not fall very far, like, or not shoot him, if we couldn't recover him, type of thing.
Right.
And so we take off walking and made this game plan, and it was kind of one of those deals that by the time we got there, it was going to be like evening. It was going to be a long day and a long ways around. So we go like 300 yards, and I just happened to stop, and I look up to my left on the hill, and there's a goat standing there like 200 yards. And I was like, I'm like, all right. I'm like, that's looking pretty good. He's all by himself, and he just had that like yellowish color, and just big, you could see a big suede back.
Right.
And the goat that we had seen the night before over there had a big chunk of gray on his neck, like he must have got from like some rocks or rubbing on some dirt or something. And it was kind of weird. I mean, we could see just his neck looked kind of funny. It was like grayish. So I'm looking at this goat at like a couple hundred yards. Well, it takes off running up the hill, of course, because it sees us, and, they're going to try to get away and get up in the rocks. So he takes off running, and he goes up into these rocks. Well, then he gets up on this big, like, kind of rock bench, and he just beds down. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I'm like, huh. And so we stop and get out my binos, and I'm looking at him, and Thomas, is sitting there looking at him, and he's like, that's a pretty good goat. And I was like, yeah, he looks pretty nice. And so I grab my spotter, throw it on him because he's just laying down. Well, then it was kind of one of those things that, well, yeah, that's a real nice goat, know? And so then it was like, dude, first morning, I don't know if I want this to happen. Like we just talked about.
Yeah.
It's like you prepare for so long. And I literally when Nick and I went on that bear hunt the first time, so I spend a lot of time in the gym, but I do a lot of weightlifting. Yeah. And Nick basically ran me into the ground because he's like this, noodle, and he just goes. And so Nick's just an endurance guy.
Yeah, I've heard he can climb.
Yeah.
I've heard he's a good hiker.
Yeah, so he just goes. And so Nick kind of killed me the first time, let alone I had new boots, but at the same time, I was not in endurance. Like I was good, strong, physical, but like my endurance sucks. So after that, Nick banned me to the stair stepper. So I was on the stair stepper for 2 weeks or 3 weeks until I went back on that bear hunt every day for like 45 minutes, just hammering. And so I'm amazed how much it helped in 3 weeks, but I stayed on that all the way till my goat hunt. And I was on it 5-6 days a week, just hammering, wearing
cardio.
Just heavy cardio. And the stair stepper, on like 13, 14, just cooking and wearing a pack and with weight and just going. So when I get on this goat hunt, I'm thinking like, dude, nothing's stopping me, and so it was kind of one of those things when we climbed that mountain the night before, I was good to go.
Yeah.
But then now we're walking along, and as hunting would have it, it's like we're down, this goat's up on this hill, and I'm like, man, I put in all that work, and I'm going to shoot one and not have to really like
work at it.
Yeah, work and climb after it, And so it's kind of like one of those things though, like you've spent a lot of time on other hunts where you've spent, 7 to 10, 15 days and
put in the work and put in the grind and the suck.
And never got something, but it was like the last day.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of one of those things that it's like something's going to happen. Eventually hunting, it's going to happen easy, or I say easy, but like quicker. And so we're looking at this goat. We start counting rings on this thing. And I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3. And we can see like 6 rings. And Thomas is like, that's a good goat. He's like, most goats, if you can see that, he's like, they got a couple more rings right down at the base in their hair that you can't see. And so I didn't know that about goats though. So it's kind of one of those things where like, okay, so if you can see 6, he's probably 8, 9, somewhere in there. And that's what he was trying to tell me. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's 8.5 or 9. All right. But then it was like, how long is he? And so Thomas, we're trying to judge them by their ears. And so like 5 inches, 5.5 inch ears. So you like take that and put it on, see if you can double their ears,
Right.
And so we're like looking at this goat, and I was like, dude, I want to kill like a 9.5 inch goat. Like I'm up here, this is trophy goat country, or like no one's been in here. I want to kill a big goat. And I didn't really care to kill like a world record. Like that wasn't my goal. I just wanted to kill a nice billy.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this thing, and I'm like, he's 9 for sure. And Thomas is like, 9.5. Well, my dad had always told me you can never see the last half inch of horn. He's like, I don't care how good your spotter is. I don't care, what it is. Unless the goat is 20 yards in front of you, you're not going to be able to see that last half inch.
Okay.
And so it was kind of one of those things. I'm like, man, if Thomas is 9.5, that sucker's got to be pushing 10, because, and you can see his horns, right? But they don't look as big, because it's like sweeping back and like they get so thin. And he was 310 yards. So it wasn't like he was a long ways away.
Sure.
But he's against rocks and it's dark and it's kind of like you can't see like how much it's going. Well, the other problem is when they get that big fat base, at the bottom for Big Billy, then their horns look even shorter because the mass thing.
Yeah, I've always thought, I've never hunted goats, so I've never really paid that much attention to every little detail on how to score them up and all that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the year I draw, I will.
Yeah.
But I've always thought it's got to be really difficult to get to, within a half an inch.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough.
That was my struggle.
Yeah.
And so I just kept trying to think about like what my dad had told me, you know. And then I got my guide though, who's been in on plenty of goats. So I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about, you know, and so I'm kind of taking his word for it. But then it was one of those things. I'm like, dude, I don't know if I want to kill one. I don't know if I want to shoot one this fast.
Well, you got great weather.
Yeah.
You're just there. Picturesque spot.
Yeah.
And you got goats daily.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
and
like,
nobody else is around.
and no one else is around.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is perfect. Hunters weren't even supposed to come in for 2 more days, but of course they weren't even going to go to where I was. So it was like just me. Well, so we're looking back across up on this other hill, and that other goat's still sitting there. And I'm looking through the spotter, and I keep looking at him. And Thomas is like, yeah, he's like, that's a great goat too. He's like, you know, it's tough to tell from here. He might be bigger, you know, but he's like, what are we going to do? He's like looking at him because he'd moved a little bit. And he's like, by the time we get up there, he's like, if you shoot that thing, it's fallen.
His fall line was probably pretty rough.
All the way. And he's like, first off, he's going to fall like 300 feet straight. And then he's going to hit and tumble for another like 1,000, you know, or 1,500. And so he's like, by the time that goat gets down to the bottom, there ain't going to be much left, you know. And he's like, if he has any horns left, because, you know, he falls and snaps horns off or whatever.
Sure.
And so it was kind of, that was going through my mind. And at the same time, this whole thing's going down, then it hits me that it's my dad's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, Dad turned 70 today, and I'm missing it. Like, I'm up here hunting. And so I was like, dude, I got to kill a goat on his birthday, you know? And so as much as it was like the first day, I was like, what better thing than my dad turning 70, his favorite animal, and I kill a stud.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah,
yeah.
Sure.
So I get all settled in, and then I'm like looking, and then, of course, then it hits me again, dude, this first day, I don't know if I want to pull a trigger on this thing. And so we literally watched this goat for like half hour. And 20 minutes to a half hour. And finally, got the gun on it, you know, and then it stands up. It was kind of like one of those, well, I could have shot it laying down, but I would have had to kind of hit it in the neck. And I didn't really, it was just like, dude, he's going to stand up eventually. You might as well just wait and make sure you make a good shot in the cavity and,
sure,
you know, call her good. So finally he stands up. But then
now, was he in a spot where the fall line wasn't that bad?
Yeah. So he's like laying on this bench. So if he would have fell off the bench, he was going to fall like, you know, 50 feet max. And so it was kind of like one of those just short fall, but it was kind of grassy. So if he fell off, he was going to hit some grass. And so that was our biggest thing was Thomas is like, this goat's not going to fall very far and he's going to be recoverable. And so as you always hear goat hunters say, shoot one where you can get to it and everything playing in. Well, I'm looking around and there's just miles of country. And I'm like, dude, what else is out there? You know? And
I got to imagine that's pretty difficult.
Yeah. Like, and
you want to see more.
Yeah. You want to see more. Like, you know, no one's even been there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of one of those things that you're like, dude, I want to do this. Like, I want to go experience some stuff. I want to explore. But I got a stud standing right in front of me. What do I do?
Sure.
And most guys, you know, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things like, dude, first day, do you shoot a 350 bull or like not if he's there, you know, depending where you're at.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this goat equates to is like, you know, a 350 bull.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to pass.
Yeah.
First day, as much as we like that week of hard grinding out experience and, you know, doing all the things that you prepped for. There's a certain mark, I think, 350 bull. I don't see how anybody would pass that.
Exactly.
Us Washington guys absolutely would not pass that first day, any day.
No, you're shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all this is going through my mind, and then it's kind of one of those things like as that goat stands up, it was like, all right, like I got about 3 seconds here to make a decision because he's going to walk off that. And if he would have went off that ledge, like I don't know, you know, what way he would have went, and I don't know if I ever would have like got a shot, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of one of those things, and I kept just thinking like half inch. I'm like, dude, if he's 9.5, he's got that extra half. He's got to be pushing 10. I'm like, dude, that's a stud. I'm shooting. So I shoot, and I hit him, and I just perfect shot right behind the shoulder, right in his heart, because it's uphill pretty steep. And so he stands, and he hit the deck, and then he kind of like stood up, but he was like, I jacked another shell in, and it was kind of one of those things like, should I shoot again or not? Because it hit him good. Well, my guide, Thomas, was like, you know, I'm like, should I shoot? And, you know, yes, you know, like shoot, like don't let him get off that ledge because, you know, if he falls, you're just risking breaking. Well, right as I get ready to pull the trigger, dude, he stands up on his back feet and he's straight up in the air with his front legs straight up. And so he's just all stretched out like a bear on his hind legs with their arms up, just straight up. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. And so I was like, huh. Well, right as that happened, like I was already pulling the trigger, you know, so it was like, there was no not shooting, you know, boom. And I shoot and, you know, I hit him again right behind the shoulder, but of course, then he falls over backwards. Worst thing could ever happen to a goat, right? Because his horns, like he's going straight down on his horns.
Right.
Well, he falls off this ledge and I'm thinking he's falling down into these rocks. And so instead I don't know how it happened, but he falls off this ledge, falls like 15 feet. And there's a little grass ledge, and he lands on it. And he just hung up. But he's upside down. And I'm like, whew. I'm like, well, that worked out. But now I'm just waiting for him to roll off that and like fall down in these
Give a little
rocks.
kick at some point and go.
Yeah. And so we're sitting there, and it was kind of one of those things like Thomas and I were sitting there like looking and just waiting and, you know, waiting for him to kick or move. But he never moved. And so we're like, all right. But this is where things got a little fun because we get up there. So first off, climbing up there, it seemed like, it's 300 yards. This is nothing.
Sure.
but it was 300 yards straight up, so it's like you're still earning your climb up there, and so we get up there and then we climb up on this ledge, and now we're like, dude, this looks so easy and seems so good, but how do we get the goat? Because he's like on like a ledge that's just as wide as his back, and he's upside down, so it's like as wide as him, so like 1.5 feet, 2 feet wide, and he's just hung up, and we're like, and we got like a little gap, like probably 4 or 5 feet wide to like get over to that part, but then you got to get back across it. And so then it was like, all right, do we kick him off there and like go get him down below, or do we try to get him across here and like not risk breaking his horns or anything,
Sure.
And so we made the decision to pull him back across this gap, because then there was like a bench, another little grassy ledge that was probably 10 feet by 15 feet, so enough room to move around, do your thing. So we all grab a leg and we're like, all right, we're just gonna 1, 2, 3 this thing and go across, and if anyone starts falling, just let go, and we'll all let go, and we'll go get him. Well, I don't know how exactly it happened, but at some point, like between there and getting across the ledge, we did the 1, 2, 3, and we like just all yanked this goat. And I don't know if like we all got some extra strength or something, but like we just like threw it, like we just like threw this goat on this ledge. And so it was kind of cool that like we all did it and like no one got hurt, but it was kind of one of those things for a second, like there could have been some serious casualties.
Sure.
Sure. And so anyways, we take a bunch of pictures and everything. Well, they had one of those in reaches, and I had never used one before.
Gotcha.
And so I'm going to buy one now because
I love it.
That's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Especially for a solo guy.
Yeah.
They are invaluable. I mean, they're just money.
Have you used yours a lot?
A lot. Yeah. I've had it for years. Yeah. I started quite a few years ago with the Spot.
Mm-hmm.
My wife kind of wanted me to have that with me.
Sure.
But that was first generation, and there were some issues, and I ended up taking it back and ended up getting that in reach. And yeah, it's so good. It's so perfect for what we do. Just getting messages out, checking weather.
Yeah.
And for that, scenario when you really got to have it,
right.
It doesn't weigh much. It's perfect.
Yeah. And that was after using it and kind of experiencing that, I was like, dude, I got to get one of these.
For sure.
So I'll get one from now on. But yeah, so they have one. So I sent my dad a message and said, happy birthday.
Awesome.
And so that was kind of like, just like I said, goat down, happy birthday, so it was kind of one of those things that it was just like the coolest thing. Turned 70, killed a goat on his birthday, and then once we got up there, we realized, like, dude, this thing's a stud. Like, we didn't realize how big he was. But even at that point, we only thought he was like a little over 9.5, and got him all taken care of, caped him out. I'm gonna have Charlie life size him, and like I'm gonna have him do it on a rock so he's bedded like the way he was. And so it'll be kind of cool. I don't know where I'm gonna put the thing, but
I don't know if you want Charlie to do that. I mean, I'm looking at some of his work right now, right above your head.
I know
that bull's kind of creepy.
Yeah, big bug eye on that elk. Yeah, that was Charlie's like first masterpiece. If you ask him, he doesn't like talking about it.
But I can imagine.
Yeah.
I'd have nightmares, I think, if I had that in my house.
Yeah. I mean, that's like Halloween decoration. People come over, they're like, is this real?
Something wrong with its forehead.
Yeah.
Kind of nose puckers up. And that eyeball. Something about that eyeball.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sure Charlie's the man for
I don't know. I might rethink this goat now. So it... I'll have Charlie do that, but we get back down there, get back to camp, hike back over there, and we're sitting there for the day. And that's kind of one of those things. Like at that point, you're at the mercy of, you got to hike back to where they can pick you up from the plane, and then you're at the mercy of the weather and what they're doing. Like if they have other people coming in, other hunters, they're flying in and out, so they send a message, "Hey, goat down, come get us." But then they don't necessarily message you back right away because they're busy doing stuff, so you don't know if they're coming or not. So at this point, but then the weather, we're checking the weather, and it was like big storm coming. And so then it's like, okay, now we've killed one, but now we could literally be here for 3 days, And so like, what? So we get to go all caped out, enjoy the afternoon. It was just sunny, got warm. And I mean, it was just kind of one of those picture perfect things if you ever could have painted it. You go up, it's just sunny, you kill one, it's sunny, blue skies, you're looking at all the surroundings, taking pictures, video, everything, enjoying it, having coffee, sitting outside in a t-shirt. Like,
man, that sounds, I mean, that's the heavenly.
Yeah, like
after you've killed your animal.
Yeah, like life was great, you know? And it's so, it was like probably one of the shortest, but one of the best experiences that like I've had as far as just being in some country like that.
Sure.
And so we sit there, and then pretty quick, all of a sudden you hear like the roar of the plane. And then so Ron came and picked me up and flew me back to camp, and then flew back in and got Thomas. And the next day anyways, he got Jesse out. But the problem after that, now I'm at the lodge, and then the storm hits. And so now I'm just stuck there, and I can't fly out. I can't do anything. And most people that go up there hunt two species. You know, they hunt a moose or a caribou or a grizzly with their goat or something.
Right.
And so I didn't have another tag. All I have is a goat tag. So I was like, dude, you know, they said they would fly me out, you know, and like just if I drove all the way up, they could fly me out and I could just drive back home. Well, of course, it's getting close to September at this point. So I'm thinking like, dude, I want to get back home as quick as I can because I want to go hunt elk.
You got elk to chase back home for sure.
And so it was kind of one of those things like I just, you know, it was quick and, you know, but then I got stuck at the lodge for a few days, but that was probably one of the best things that happened because it was just nice to relax and, you know, like.
Well, and they had cookies and coffee.
Oh, dude, every day. And it was like the best thing because he was like, you get up, and it was like there was never a moment like without cookies and coffee.
Oh,
you know,
man.
it was just like service all day. It was like, it was awesome. So, and they're honestly, I mean, like if anyone's looking to go up, I mean, Ron and Marie are truly two of the nicest people you ever meet. Like they are just world class, bend over backwards for you, you know, type of people. So I mean,
sounds like they got a pretty good area.
They do, and that's the thing. I mean, they have, like Ron says, like his area, you have the chance. You might not be like one animal specific. Like you're going to kill a record book moose here. Like you have the opportunity to kill a record book moose, goat, sheep, bear, caribou, anything in his area. And so it's like there is the opportunity to kill, you know, something big.
Multiple species, quality all around.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
And so like 80% of their moose the year before, not this year, last year, 80% of their moose made Boone and Crockett.
Wow.
And so, I mean, they have big animals. And anyways, so then drove home from that. Front end went out in the Dodge. That was nice.
Oh.
And then, anyways, so then went elk hunting, went to Montana. And then this is kind of where you and I, you know, started talking again a little bit.
Yep. I think, I had already tagged out here in Washington. I'd done some other hunts, and then we started talking about Montana. I had a tag in my pocket for over there. My plan was to go over there kind of the end of the season after a lot of the guys had given up, and chase them kind of at the end. And you know, over there you got till October 15th to chase them with a bow, which is just incredible. Yeah. You know, if you live in our state, you get a hunt here
2 weeks,
and then 2 weeks. And you always have that to kind of fall back on. And you've got that kind of in-between time where there's not another archery mule deer hunt or anything. It's just perfect time to go over and chase bulls. So we we started talking. I was curious about where you were heading off into. I think you'd already killed a bull.
I think I might have killed mine already.
Yeah,
when we had talked.
Yeah. Yep. I was curious about the conditions over there and if they were talking at that point, because I think, what was the date on the bull you killed? Was that September?
Yeah, it was like the 27th or 8th. It was somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It was towards, or 9th.
And I think
29th.
I think I was curious, you know, are they still talking?
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, my worry was I was going to hit it just a little bit too late, and I had some work things coming up, and it just kind of kept pushing my trip off.
Yeah.
So I knew I'd be there maybe kind of at the tail end of it. I was wondering, are they still going to be talking? But I think you moved around to a couple different areas, started off a little further south, moved up and found just a frenzy of a spot where you were, and reassured me that they were just going nuts.
Yeah. And we were kind of in that same general area between like where I was hunting and you were hunting. We were kind of in that same spot. So it was kind of...
Yeah. I had a kind of a game plan where I'd seen bulls in the past and hunted in the past. It's just, I had never yet taken a real quality bull out of that area.
Sure.
But yeah, surprisingly, we hunt similar closeness to that.
And we didn't
where
know
you
that.
were.
Yeah. We didn't know that at the time. We kind of, it was one of those things like you start talking and like beating around the bush a little bit, and then pretty quick we figure out
it's
like,
oh, you're by that town?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of right by the town I'm at.
Yeah. And then, oh, you're west, I'm east, and I've been over there too, and so it was kind of one of those funny things that we kind of ended up hunting in the same general spot there. But
that's what's cool about having buddies that go around and see new areas. You can get little pieces of intel that are super valuable. Like your spot where you were, they were talking. Other parts further south, they weren't talking. When you started. So reassuring and going over there with confidence, knowing, all right, well, John found a whole bunch of bulls that were screaming their heads off. I think I can find some and go look in some areas. And so
and then you tromped around.
It had slowed down because I didn't get over there when I thought I had. It had slowed down significantly, but found some great stuff. Awesome country. It's kind of how I treat that country. Is I just always keep wanting to learn. Every year when I'm there, maybe I'm not going to hunt it, for the entire time. I just want to learn a little bit more. It's not a high density area for elk.
Right.
So you really got to spend a lot of time locating these little core areas and playing with them. And year to year it changes. So I just love seeing that new country, figuring out places, and I'll always have that banked in my mind. Like this is a spot I'll have to look in the future.
Yeah. So. And it's kind of one of those things like, coming from Washington, we're kind of in that spot where there's not a lot of big bulls unless you draw a tag. And there are some places where there are big bulls, but it's not like Idaho or Montana where you can, certain places in Montana where you can go and there's just a vast majority of bigger bulls around. And that's kind of how that country is. Like, it doesn't really...
It's tough. It's not country that you're... Like we talked about, that you might not even need binoculars.
Right.
Probably don't. You could probably leave them at camp because it's so thick. And that type of country where the terrain is such that, like I always say, I want to go in those places where they grow old and die, or they at least have the opportunity to.
Sure.
Whereas, the more glassable open country, it's typically not the case. They typically get killed if there's a rifle season late. But I've always been kind of intrigued by those areas. They're difficult to hunt. They may not be that much fun unless you've got screaming bulls.
Right.
Because you're not seeing a lot of animals.
Right.
If you are seeing them, they're 15, 20 yards in front of you.
Yeah.
Whether you got a shot or not, who knows. But I've always been intrigued with those type areas, Idaho and Montana as well, just because of the fact you have opportunity to just pull out a monster, just an old age class, heavy horned bull that may never get seen by folks. So,
and that's kind of how I feel. It's like I want a chance where I can go to, it's like if I kill one, there's a good chance he's going to be big.
Could be a good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where I'm looking at when I'm trying to go hunt an area like that, so that's kind of what happened to me is like I had taken another buddy and we'd went and hunted an area for a few days, got in and it was just cold and snowing, and Montana kind of got covered in that snow early this year, and it just nothing was happening.
Yeah. And
we were glassing up bulls. I mean, I had a 6-point bull 300 yards right below me, and he was sitting there with some cows. And I cow called at him, hid behind a tree. He didn't know I was there. And it was behind a tree, and I cow called just trying to, because we hadn't heard a bugle in 3 days. And it was kind of like, well, I take that back. But it was not enough to get you excited.
Sure.
And then, so it was kind of one of those things like you get down there, and then, it's like you're looking at a bull, and okay, I'm at least going to get him to bugle, Dude, I tried everything. Cow calling, bugling, everything. At that point, I was like, dude, Phelps's calls don't call elk, it was
you gotta have somebody to blame.
I know, and I
blame Phelps all the time.
Me too, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, I've called, elk with Phelps's calls, and so I know they work, and it was like one of those things. The bull literally would just lift his head and look, and it was like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. So then I'm trying all sorts of different variations, as sound, just something to get them to talk, and they weren't running off. It was like, dude, or here, but it was like they just didn't want to make any noise. And so then it was kind of one of those things, and I think a lot of elk hunters get stuck in the fact of, you know, hey, this is my area, I'm going to hunt here, and I've been here before, and I want to just, I know it, I'm going to kill an elk eventually, you know, like, but you got to adapt.
Sure.
You know, it's like, hey, I'm not hearing any elk, I'm seeing them, they're not doing anything, I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, you kind of have to be aggressive with elk, right? If you want to be consistent,
right,
year after year.
Yeah,
it could happen that you just, you know, buckle down and hunt an area hard day in and day out. But I think consistency comes from going and finding those bulls willing to play.
Exactly, and that's kind of one of the things I learned from hunting with Phelps and Charlie over the last few years. You know, it's kind of, you know, you hear an elk, and it's like there is no just sitting and like, oh, we'll slow play it. Maybe you will, depending on the situation. But for the most part, it's like, dude, we're going. We're hauling. We're flying, trying to get to that elk. And, you know, if we screw it up, big deal. We move on and we find the next one. Right. And, you know, and then so on. And so in this case, all the snow and everything, I have another buddy who lives up north and from that where we were, and I got in touch with him, and I was like, hey, you know, is there anything going on? Yeah, they're screaming. Are you kidding me? You know, it's like we're sitting here wasting our time, you know, and there's bulls screaming. So I'd hunted this other spot several times, and, you know, it was kind of like, well, quite a few, and I knew the area, I knew where I could go in, I knew where the wallows were, I knew everything. So we drove up there, literally parked, got out, and went for a hike, and it was like bulls were screaming instantly. And it was kind of like, all right, you know.
Should have been here days ago.
We should have been here days ago. And so it was kind of one of those things. And then now the advantage is I know where I'm going. I know everything. So we dropped down in, got on a giant right off the bat, didn't end up killing him. We heard some bulls bugling the next day. And then we only had another day. So it was like 3 days, you know, left to hunt. And, or that day. And then we had one more. So anyways, get back in the next morning. And there were bulls going everywhere. And it was just kind of like one of those things, why were we not here sooner? Because, you know,
you had spent several days in another area.
Yeah.
And they just weren't talking.
Yeah, and they weren't doing anything. So now we're chasing bulls, and we get down in there. Well, we end up calling in, we had like 6 bulls bugling. And we get down in on one, and we were hiking down to get down on one, and a 6-point was bedded. My buddy was like, hey, I'm just going to bugle. And I was like, yeah, we need to figure out where that bull is. And because we hadn't heard him for a little bit. And all of a sudden, as it goes, a bull stands up right in front of us, like 70 yards. And it's a 6-point. It's just standing there. And I can't get a shot. And I didn't want to shoot because it was like, I knew he wasn't the big one. And it was kind of at that point, like we've talked in that area, you've got a chance to kill
monsters.
A monster, yeah. And so it was like, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, he's a 6-point, but like, yeah, you know, not something I was necessarily interested in. And so he takes off, anyways, before I could even get a shot. And then if I had moved, and then so we get down, and we start downwind, and it's that type of country. It's just steep and rugged stuff. And so we keep dropping down in this canyon. Well, I'm like, we got to get down below the elk and then come up underneath them because the wind, the thermals are coming down. And my buddy this whole time thinks like I'm just out to kill him. You know, he's like, what are we doing? You know, you're out of control. Like, you know, if you want to kill a freaking elk, you know, you got to be aggressive. You got to get down in on them. And it was kind of one of those, all right, we're going to get up, we're going to come underneath of them and sneak up. And granted, it's tough because they're looking down through the timber. But I was like, we just can't make any noise. You know, we'll just not cow call, no bugles, no nothing. And I'll sneak in on this bull. Well, I cow called. We finally get to a spot, and he's just above us about 100 yards in the timber. And it was kind of one of those spots where you could cow call, but you needed to move forward quick because he was going to come down through the timber looking, you know, for you. And so it was kind of a little blowdown, not bad. Well, I cow call and just take off on a dead run. And I think the thing a lot of guys freak out, you know, with elk or whatever is that they think they're making too much noise.
I think that's impossible.
I agree. And that was
elk make so much noise when they're traipsing through. They're popping sticks
and running, and when they do run, they make so much noise. And I think with like hunting with Phelps and Charlie, it's like I learned a lot from them as far as that. It's like you can never be too quiet. Like just start making noise, elk make noise, and or be too loud, and just go, you know. And so I took off on a dead run, made a couple cow calls, and just took off kind of angling up towards the bull, but on a dead run. And hopped a couple logs, got set up, ranged a couple trees, and this bull comes out. And I see him, and at that time he's probably like 40-something yards, and he's just angling, coming down right in front of me, but he was behind some trees, so I'm getting ready to draw. Well, then he turns and kind of went back uphill, and then he just stops in the wide open. And I'm sitting there looking up there, and I'm like, man, that is a stud. You know, it's one of those that we're after, you know, and he's probably a 340 bull, just solid, just 340, and I range him 67. And it was one of those things that I'm like, man, I could shoot. He's in the wide open, and I could shoot. But it was one of those I just didn't feel comfortable shooting,
right?
You know, and so a few days prior, I might have, but a few days prior, I had my bow sitting leaning up against the tire. We were getting ready to head out at this trailhead, and my buddy came around, wasn't paying attention, and he stepped on my sight and snapped it off. And so I had a Montana Black Gold adjustable slider, and he stepped and snapped it off. Ouch. And we're at the trailhead getting ready to hike in, and it was just one of those things. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how did this just happen? You know?
Kidding.
And so I thankfully had a backup sight, but it was a fixed pin, Spot Hog 7-pin. So I had a pin for 67. I mean, I had a 70. Like, I could have shot, but it was just, I don't know. Like, I wasn't feeling it. So here I got this 340 bull standing there, and I let him walk off. You know, but it was like, if you're just not feeling it, I would rather not shoot and wound him, or you know, whatever else. Who knows? You know, you hit him in the guts or something, you know, and now you got a mess.
I mean, let's face 67, that's a long shot. That's a long poke right there.
It is. Yeah. But how many guys out there, I mean, most guys probably would have flung one, you know, I mean, at a bull that big. And, you know, I mean, unfortunately, it is what it is. It's archery hunting, big bull. A lot of guys get excited and they want to kill one. And to me,
and I think it happens far too often with guys, is, you know, with folks' actual capabilities.
Exactly.
You know, shooting at a target versus shooting at a live animal, totally different. I mean, we could have a whole podcast on that, and people have, but I'm definitely in the same mindset that I would rather take a shot very comfortable than risk one where I'm like, oh, hey, I got it.
Yep.
That's not what I want to be saying when that arrow goes in.
Exactly.
I want to know I got it.
Exactly.
In fact, my longest shot ever on a bull was 50 yards, and I was really hesitant about that. I've never taken a shot farther than that, and I think the next longest was 43. And so, yeah, it's like, man, you think at that point, especially in the rut, you're going to get them closer.
Yeah.
Too. But, yeah, I think that's a great move. I think more people... you know, it's respectful that you did not take that shot if you felt like it just wasn't, you know, you don't want to be surprised when you hit him.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. And I kept thinking in my head, like, well, you know, maybe we'll call him back in also. Maybe, you know, we didn't know we were there. And so it's like, you know, maybe if I keep going, you might call him back in, or he'll be here next year and it'll be bigger.
Sure.
And so that was kind of my thought process in the whole situation. And so I let him walk off. Well, of course, you know how that goes. He just walked off, and he started walking up the canyon. I don't know if he did know something was right. I mean, they don't get that big from being dumb.
Sure.
And so I don't know what happened, but he took off, and we could still hear he would bugle. Like, so we still had 5 other bulls bugling. And so it was kind of one of those things that, what do we do, you know? And so he would still scream, and he was screaming back at the other bulls, so we didn't even have to call, really. We kept going, side hilling through a couple of these draws in the timber, and got on another bull, called in another one. My buddy almost killed it, and then I almost killed it, and then we kept going, and pretty quick it was like one of those, we've been going through the timber here for a couple hours into this opening in the timber, and it was kind of a little draw, and then it was one of those spots where it was like grassy timber, and I was like, man, this is good going. And this bull screams, and he's just over the backside of this hill, and I'm like, I'm going to cow call, and we're going to run as fast as we can up this hill through this grass, because he's not going to hear us. I mean, we're going to be going just quiet.
So kind of like a solo tactic. You know, cow call, try to get closer because you know he's coming in.
Exactly.
Versus having a guy set back from you.
Yeah,
doing the calling.
And that's kind of my thing. I had backed up and done the call-in thing with my buddy before that here, like an hour before that, and where I was doing the call-in and raking, and the bull came in and he just never got a shot. And then, of course, as that goes, it called him by him towards me, you know, and he's coming in, and I wasn't ready. And then so he takes off. Well, then so the solo tactic thing, what I do, you know, generally if I'm by myself like that, is I either bugle or cow call, but wherever I make that noise, I run forward 40 to 60, 80 yards, depending on how much I can get away with. Yeah. Because that bull's probably going to come in there, but he's not coming all the way. And so it's like, at least I can cover that ground, but I try to make those noises in a spot where I can get away with that movement. And if he's over a ridge, if he's in some thick stuff, or I can run, like I need somewhere where I can make that movement and not get busted.
Right.
And so it was one of those things. In this case, my buddy wasn't 100% like, you know, on the calls. He's one of those guys that's a little newer to calling. So he, you know, I don't know if, you know, I wouldn't say he's necessarily like a horrible caller, but he's just not up to par, like as far as like the rest of us or what we would do. And he's just nervous about using them a little bit.
Sure.
And so it was kind of like, okay, I'll do the calling, and this will work better for both of us because we'll both run forward, and then we'll both be able to get a shot. Potentially, you know, rather than one guy's back. Now we got two shooters.
Right.
And the odds of us getting the bull are probably going to be a lot better. So we call, take off running up this hillside, and, you know, of course, now you're setting yourself up. You better be in halfway decent shape, because now you got to get a shot off, like after you've just, you know, ran your heart and your heart's pumping. And
that's why we do those train to hunt events, for that specific scenario.
Exactly.
Elevated heart rate, and gotta rip off a quality shot.
Exactly. And so we run up this hill, and we get up there about 70 yards, I'd say, and I'm on one side of this big fir tree, and he's on the uphill side, and the bull was coming over, and so I'm on the downhill side, and this bull comes over the ridge, and he's just screaming, and I'm thinking, okay, like, I'm range a tree, and this tree I range is 47, and I'm thinking, you know, he's coming down in front of the tree, so he's less than that at some point. Well, he stops behind this big fir, and he's just broadside, just screaming, and I can see him, and I look over at my buddy, and he's not drawing his bow, and I'm like, what is going on? You know, I'm thinking, like, dude, you need to be shooting right now. You know, like, that thing's got to be in the wide open for you.
Right.
I don't know what happened. Like, he's never killed a bull in like with his bow, and so, you know, it's like he's new to the whole thing, and so it was kind of one of those things I can understand. Like, we all
like didn't maybe know. I know as a new hunter, it's easy to freeze up. Like, I don't know when I should draw. If I draw, is he going to see me?
Exactly.
I'm just not going to draw.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I don't know, like, at what point, if any of that happened or not, you know, like, I never really asked him about it. You know, it was just
now, was that bull in the open for him too? Like, from where he was?
I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. He said no, but, you know, it's kind of one of those things. Like, I look back down there might have been a shot. And so, you know, it was, well, based on where it was. I mean, there's like, it's in timber, but there's like 6 trees instead of 600 in most of that country. Yeah. So, I mean, there definitely should have been some openings. But so then the bull goes behind another tree. Well, he's kind of angling down towards me, quartered to me just a little, but of course, now I draw back because he looks like there's an elk trail up there, but I didn't know it. And as they do, they kind of go down the top of the ridges. Well, he hits that, and he starts down, and it was kind of one of those things. I'm like, oh, dude, perfect, you know? So I draw back. Well, he stops behind a tree, as it happens every time. And then he rips off a bugle, and now I'm at full draw. And I'm looking, and I've got like a dead kind of vine maple looking tree kind of right in front of me at like 5 yards. And I've got like about a 10-inch to a foot like circle through this vine maple. And then if he clears that, because it was kind of broke off, if he clears it, now I've got 30 yards of wide open. But I've got like a 10-inch, 12-inch circle right here in front of me. And I'm like, if I can shoot through that, if he stops, but the odds of me stopping him there are probably not going to happen. Well, so now I'm at full draw, and my buddy, now he has a shot, and so like he looked over at me, but he seen me at full draw, and so he said he didn't want to draw because he didn't want to screw it up for me. But you know, I don't know what happened, but so I'm sitting here, and I don't know how long, at least over a minute, a little over, and I was getting to the point where my arms were starting to shake, and I was like, dude, I don't know, I might have to let down pretty soon, you know?
Yeah.
And so then he just steps forward, and it was one of those things, all the stars aligned, you know, as you hear, like sometimes when we're hunting, like everything's got to go right, you know, and he just stopped right in that hole, and it was like perfect. And I mean, it happened kind of so quick at that point when he moved forward, but he stopped to bugle, and it was 30 yards, and I smoked him. Well, he turns around and runs, and he ran back like they do where they came from, runs like 15 yards, and just fell over.
Huh.
I've never had
Perfect.
one die that fast ever. And it was kind of like the coolest thing because we both saw it, but it was kind of like you're in disbelief because he literally just turned and, you know, wasn't running, but like kind of that fast trot, you know, that they do, like getting out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And he just plopped over. Huh. And it was like, all right. Well, at the same time, then he's down, and we still got bulls bugling. And I'm like asking my buddy, I'm like, dude, like there's one 200-300 yards right below us. Let's go kill that thing, you know. And that was the big one that we had got on the other day. And you know how that goes. It was like, dude, we got one down. It's like 80 something degrees.
Oh yeah.
You know, we should probably get this taken care of.
You know he's down. He didn't run away, and you don't have an hour to play with.
Yeah. And so we, of course, at that point, we should have went and tried to kill that other one. But at the same time, it was like, we need to be smart here and take care of this elk and get it out. So we got it all quartered up and packed up to this trail. And then we had a couple mile hike out on the trail. But, you know, 2 guys, 2 trips, like shuttling up meat and then come back down and shuttle the next batch up, and then we took a load out and then came back in for the next load. But at least we had the climb out of the canyon done, you know. And anyways, so that was that, and then we went and killed.
Yeah. Then I was after that when I came up, hit some of that country, hit some different country, and got my bull. I think so. Then you had, I think I remember you talking about your dad drew a moose tag, right?
Yep.
For Washington.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember you were pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So my dad, though, this guy, he's been on a roll. So it's 3 years. So he drew a cow moose tag 2 years ago. Then last year draws a quality bull tag down in the Blue Mountains. Yeah. And then this year he draws the best moose tag in our state.
You gotta be kidding me.
And I'm just like, dude, but to preface that, he's 70 years old now. He put in for moose for 40 years in Washington before he drew a bull tag.
Wow.
He was at the very first moose drawing that ever happened in our state, where they actually pulled a name out of a bucket on paper. And so, like, my dad's been around a while, you know.
Yeah.
And
he deserved this draw.
He's been like putting in forever. He deserved it. And so, like, max points, you know, like he's been after it. So he draws this moose tag, and of course, you know, holy cow, I can't believe, you know, I drew the moose tag, you know. And so that was really kind of a cool thing, because, you know, I got to do the goat hunt, but now I got to go to chance to do something.
Go help him on a
he
moose
wanted
hunt
to do.
Yeah.
And so that was a really cool thing that, you know, I was looking forward to doing this year. So I literally came home from my elk hunt and turned around next day, washed some clothes, dropped the elk off, and was...
Yeah, I remember you boogied out very quickly.
Yeah.
And went after that.
Yeah, and I was supposed to be going with Phelps and Nick over to Montana to hunt with the land of the free with Born and Raised.
Right.
And it was kind of one of those things that I was just like, dude, I don't know if this is in the cards. You know, well, granted, I'd killed my bull, but I was hoping to go back and at least help them.
Sure.
And so we get over there. And my buddy that John Davis from Montana, well, he used to be from here. We used to hunt elk here together a lot. And then he moved to Montana. And then so now we kind of stay in touch all the time. And he's just an elk. He's probably one of those guys that's like the most like or not known elk
just
killer.
Unheard of.
Yeah, unheard of. But he kills more elk than like anyone I know. I mean, well, maybe besides you, but he... the dude kills elk. And I mean, he's got some studs. He's got 2 bulls here from Washington, over-the-counter tags in a spot that's, we're not known for big bulls unless our draw units.
Yeah.
And he's got one that's 344 and another that's almost 360.
Holy smokes.
And then, you know, I mean, the dude, and he's got a handful of 330, 40 and a 360 bull out of Montana now. And I mean, the dude has just got a bunch of big bulls, and he's not known. You know, he has no social media, no nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he came over to help us on this moose because, you know, we've been hunting together for years, and it was like, hey, let's get John over here. And he wanted to come. He had some days off. He wasn't hunting. So he came over, and so then we took off. And it was kind of one of those things like, dude, we don't know anything about calling in moose. Like, you know, we can call in an elk or a deer, but, you know, calling in a moose, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so my dad spends all summer watching these videos on, you know, internet, and he just kind of figured out what Google is a few years ago. So he just Googles everything, you know, like, oh, Google how to call moose, Google how to call this or that, or, you know. And so it's kind of funny to listen to him because anytime that you bring anything up, he just tells you to use Google.
Go to the Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he won't use a phone. He doesn't have a phone, like no cell phone, no nothing. So he's just totally old school.
Huh.
And so
refreshing.
Yeah, it's kind of cool in a way, but it's kind of a pain sometimes when we try to go hunt and you're like, hey, let's meet here. And then he shows up on like his time. I'll give him credit though. If you say be there at 7:00, he's there at like 6:30. Like he's early. But 2 years ago, we were over elk, or when he drew his elk tag, we were meeting down there in Dayton, and Charlie and I were heading over, and we were going to meet him there in town. And Charlie and I both drove separate, and then because we were going to leave to go to Idaho to go hunt with Jason after that. And Charlie and I get to town. Dad's nowhere to be found. And we sit there, and we sit there, and we sit there in like an hour, and like, where's Dad? And all of a sudden, here he comes strolling in, and it's like no care in the world, but he's always early, so that made me think something was wrong, you know. So we're about to start driving back down the highway, looking for him on the side of the highway, you know. And so, long story short, he finally shows up, but it was like no care in the world. And Charlie and I are sitting here like freaking out, you know. And I'm like, Dad, you need to get a phone. Well, anyways, so then we get over here on this moose thing. Well, we got first day, and we got there before the opener, went out and went up and we drove around a few spots. We heard one moose grunt, and that was kind of cool because we were like, all right, at least we know where one bull is at. And so we'll go back up there in the morning and at least see if we can get a look at him. And so we go up there and went to a spot. We went to a spot, and we were like, yeah, you know, let's go out on this point here in the morning and do a couple grunts and see if we can get something going. Man, first spot, we freaking park, walk out, and Dad whips out his old moose call. He bought this big, like,
the tube.
Yeah, that thing from guy in Alaska that makes these moose calls, and this big, tube horn thing. Well, I don't know what it is. And so he's sitting here, and he's like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. Dude, boom, bull starts grunting. We're like, we're in them, you know. And so we take off down in this draw, messed around with it for a few hours trying to get it to come in, and just never, it was coming closer, but we just never got to look at it. So we're going to go with like that one was, you know, giant because we never seen it. Sure. So, you know, like
that's how that works.
Yeah, big one got away. And so then we get out of there, and we went driving down the road, and about another couple miles, you park on this corner, and there's kind of like a big, like a reprod patch in this timber where they had like thinned it. And that thin timber, as you know, is like not fun walking. And so we get out and call, and this bull answers. And we're like, you gotta be kidding me. We're 2 for 2. Like, dude, we are good moose hunters now, you know. And so
we got this moose calling down to it.
Yeah. Art. And so we're like, we're good. And so all of a sudden, then this moose, he's working his way, and he comes up through the timber, and he's sitting here, and pretty quick. Well, it took us forever to find him. And I think our problem was we were like looking at his knees, because, you know, it's like you're looking down through there and you don't realize how big they are. And so we're looking down through the trees, and it's like, oh, you know, there he is. And you see horns, and then realize, wow, that thing's way bigger. Yeah. Well, then the whole, okay, how far is he? You know, because we're thinking, you know, my dad's trying to bow hunt this. And so we're thinking like, dude, you know, we got this. And we're looking at him. Well, then we realize, that's not really what we want to shoot, you know. And in my mind, like, I'm thinking first day, like, you don't want to shoot that, you know, the best moose tag. And I had some intel from some other guys on some moose running around that, Washington's not known, for 70-inch moose like the Yukon, but we do have some pretty big Shiras moose.
Sure.
And so we had some good intel, and it was kind of one of those things that, all right, don't shoot that thing. You don't want to be killing that. Well, of course, my dad, I just want to kill a moose with my bow. So my buddy John, well, would you kill it? Yeah, I would kill it. Okay, well, it's Dad's choice. I'll let him kill whatever he wants to kill. I'm not going to argue it. And so we go down and start down through the timber. Well, we thought it was like, we didn't range it, but we were thinking, like 80 yards. And then we went back to the old how big the moose is because we kept walking. And then we're going over like blowdowns a little bit and like that thin timber.
Yeah.
And pretty quick, we're like, dude, ranging the truck, and it's like 167 yards. And I was like, there's no way he was that far down here. And well, he was. And they're just that big, like, you're used to looking at a deer and like,
Sure.
And so he was down in there. Well, we got down in on him, and I don't know what happened. He just eventually didn't, he had walked off and didn't want us and like what we had to say at that point. So we actually went down through the woods. My buddy John my dad watches too much TV, sees Jim Shockey carrying one of those boat oars as a horn.
Sure.
And so my dad got this boat oar. So John's going down through there waving this boat oar. My dad's got his call on his bow, and I'm filming the whole thing and taking pictures, and we're marching down through there. Dude, we probably look like the biggest circus going down through the woods, but it's kind of one of those things that, it is what it is. And anyways, so we leave, get back up to the truck, go drive around a little more. And we went and hiked out a couple spots, seen some big moose tracks, and so we knew there was some around. And came around on one corner actually, and a guy had flew off the road on his ATV and came up the road, one of those at like coming up the gravel road at 50 miles an hour type deals. Didn't realize the corner, and he went straight off this bank and down there, and he was down over the hill like 40 yards and all screwed up. And anyways, so we helped him get the quad out, but that was our good deed. So we felt like after that, like, hey, like
karma's on our side.
Karma's on our side.
Sure.
So we go down, and we left and went over to a completely new area in the unit. And we start up this road just to go check out some new ground from some stuff my dad had heard from some guys that had the tag in the past. And we're going up the road, and, it's one of those things like we're in the bottom. We're trying to get clear to the top, and we only have like an hour and a half, 2 hours of daylight. So it was like, we need to get up there. This is perfect time. I am flying up this gravel road in my truck, and my dad's riding shotgun, and then my buddy John's in the back, and I'm just hauling up this gravel road. And all of a sudden, dude, my dad is like the best guy. He calls it cruising speed. He says that he doesn't see anything until we're at cruising speed. And then once we are, like, he'll spot animals. And I swear, like, once we get above 35 miles an hour, we could be going along through the timber, and he'll look off, and like, there's a elk, oh, there's a deer, oh, like.
But it takes 35 miles an hour.
At least. That's cruising speed. So for anyone out there, like, you got to get to cruising speed. Yeah, before you see them.
I gotcha.
And so we're just flying. I don't even know how fast. I was going faster than 35. But all of a sudden, my dad, stop. Put it in, like, he's yelling at me, and I'm like thinking moose. And no, big old black bear.
Oh, yeah.
It's just feeding. And so I slam on the binders. All of a sudden, Dad's piling out of the rig with his rifle, and I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like, dude, we're moose hunting. Like, well, he takes off running back down the road and runs up into the timber, and there's like this big, like, clear cut. Boom, like, shoots this bear. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? I'm like, we're bear hunting now, and so shoots this bear.
He's an opportunist.
Yeah, that's his thing, and so, I mean, I'll give him credit. Like, he went after it and killed it, and John and I are just sitting down, like, glassing this bear up there and like whatever, and so shoots it and rolls it. Well, anyways, so then, of course, now we got to pack a bear. So we go up and get this bear and drag it down through this clear cut and over some trees and like down through the timber and get it back to the road and whatever. And anyways, take a few pictures, throw it in the truck. Got it, throw it in the truck, boom, we're on our way. So now I'm like, dude, now we're really trying to get up top. And it was kind of one of those things like maybe we should have just like stopped and, went back to camp and called it a day. Well, even though we still had like an hour and a half, ish or less of daylight, but it is what it is. So I'm flying up this road. We get up towards the top, get out, call, and it was one of those that like kind of started getting kind of windy, and so we couldn't really hear much. And anyways, so we're going along, and get up in this like bench, and there's a road that took off, and my dad had said that some guys that he knew had killed moose out this road. And it was kind of like, all right, this is where we want to be. So of course now we're here. We got a few minutes, like 30 minutes of daylight, and it was like, let's go check it out.
Right.
So here we are. And dude, we didn't go anywhere. Freaking look, and there's a moose just like right in the middle of like this cat road. Like this, like just kind of nasty, like growing, one of those that's kind of grown, and like whatever. Big old bull moose. And I was just like, what is going on? I'm like, you got to be kidding me, And so, of course, Dad's like, his thing, we're looking at it, and he's looking at us, and I'm like, dude, hey, this is your tag. Like, I'm not telling you what to do, And so it was kind of one of those things, like, but the cool thing was, like, this moose just looked crazy. Like, it's looking at us, and it's got 3 like triple brows on each side, but the one side just looked like kind of non-typical looking. Like it was weird. Like usually the moose kind of have their paddles and then their fronts, but like they kind of just are webbed in the front with like, points that are 4 to 6 inches long. Well, this one like stuck out there in these points, and they look like they're freaking 12 inches long on a 20-inch point. And so it was like, you got 20 plus another big point coming off of it, and it was like, dude, that looks real big, and so it was kind of one of those, I don't know, but his paddles weren't like fully filled out like a normal like big like a paddle. They were, I mean, they're paddles, but it just wasn't like a huge big paddle. But it was kind of one of those things, like his fronts were so unique that it was like, dude, I don't know if I'd let that go if it was my tag, And so about as quick as we said that, it's like Dad, boom, and shoots this thing and drops it. And so it was kind of like, well, this went way too fast, but it was kind of one of those things that, hey, our karma came back from helping those guys.
Sure.
And so, I mean, it's a 40-inch moose, which isn't a giant, but I mean, for Washington, I mean, that's
good for Washington.
Yeah,
for a Shiras. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good moose. And so we walk up there. Well, my dad, we had all been talking, and like our visions of packing this thing, we were like, dude, we're going to shoot one down in a hole. We're going to have such a hard time packing this moose out of the woods. Like, this is going to be just a nightmare. So he goes, boys, let me tell you. He's like, this is how we do it. He's like, us old guys, see, we're smart, and we shoot them in the road. And I mean, I say road, but like, old grade.
Yeah.
And he's like, we shoot them so that way the packing's easy. He's like, it's flat ground, and it's not extremely far. And he's like, so now you guys just take this moose and just, get it to the truck for me. And so
that is pretty smart with a moose.
Yeah. And so, it was kind of one of those things where, Dad's like, hey, I got this down, and you guys are, good to go. And so then he's joking around. He's like, 70. I just save all my action for one day. He's like, I show you how to get done. I shoot a bear and a moose and
2 critters.
Yeah, we're good to go. And so
that's perfect, really. I mean, I've always wondered, where is that line that you're going to draw away from a road on a moose? I've never hunted them, so
yeah.
Being an elk guy, a deer guy, we don't typically draw lines,
right?
But with a moose, you kind of have to,
yeah.
Right?
And so everybody that we talked to over there, everyone, any that's killed moose or everyone, they were telling us, just drive the roads. You'll kill one in the road,
right?
And it's like, well, yeah. But I'll say you can't see off the roads over there. Like, there's very few places you can see. There's a few, like, older clear cuts, but there's very few places that you can literally see off the road. It is that thick, older, nasty brush that's, like, 10 to 15 feet tall, and the trees are so thick you can't see.
That's that terrain that moose love, too. Yeah, lots of them up there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of moose, but it's like, dude, you can't see them. So consequently, I would say most of the moose probably end up getting shot
right
in the road.
Which is, that's a good thing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, geez. 2 young guys, probably could have got it out, put you guys through some bad times, but man, I bet you were pretty thankful.
Oh, I was
dropping them in the road.
Yeah,
like
it was kind of one of those
semi-road
things. Yeah, it was like, all right, like, thank you. You know, like, because I had just gotten done packing an elk out, you know, day and a half prior, and I was just like, dude, now I'm packing a moose.
Oh man, my dad drew Idaho years ago, and same thing. He killed his bull. You know, where we could get motorcycles. We got those DR 200s.
Oh yeah.
So you can get a motorcycle on a trail. We got it within 100 yards of the trail.
Perfect.
Or of, you know, that's where he dropped the moose within that trail. So, yeah, all we had to do was pack the meat over to the bike and take the bike, you know, 12 miles or something. But that was a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting them, you know, 5 miles off of a trail, no way. Wouldn't want to do it.
No. And that's the thing. I mean, I thought about myself, you know, I'm like, dude, if I draw over there.
Yeah. Once you see one down and you realize how big they are.
Yeah.
Oh, it's intimidating.
It is. And that's kind of my thing. I don't know. Like before I was thinking I'd pick some trails out and I was like, let's just backpack out there.
Right.
You know, and we'll just backpack on that ridge and we'll probably be able to see and then we'll probably kill one in that hole.
Yeah.
But now I have like a whole nother like outlook on this. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to camp in that road and just hope that moose crosses.
Moose are different.
Yeah.
Moose are different. Yeah, it's funny when my dad killed his bull, we were, that was Idaho. So wolf country, big time wolf country. And, you know, he killed it late in the day and I wasn't there. I had to drive to get to him to help him break it down. So what he did, because he was worried about the wolves, you know, chewing on that thing all night.
Yep.
Well, he's funny. He packs around a little, tiny little radio. Mm-hmm. So when he gets bored, he'll like listen to news.
Sure.
Usually.
Yeah.
That's what old guys do. And what he did is he put his radio in a Ziploc, because it was just miserable conditions. And he put that radio right on top of the cavity of the moose. And he played, I think he said he played Christian country music was going. It's the first station he found. He blared that thing as loud as he could. And
oh, that's funny.
Who knows if the wolves didn't come into that. But there were no wolves on it that next morning. So pretty ingenious, I thought.
That's a good idea. I remember that.
Killing elk. Pack a radio, but
killing elk or something in wolf country and do that.
Yeah.
If you had to get out.
It worked.
It's a good idea.
So, well, cool. Yeah, man, you got stories for days. Holy smokes. I mean, it's been such a great year.
Yeah.
You know, we could probably go on for another hour. I think we're 2 hours in.
Are we?
Dude, you got, you know, I think what a lot of people know you for is giant whitetail.
Yeah.
We haven't even got to your giant whitetail yet.
I know.
And you killed a bruiser this year. It seems to be something you do every year.
Yeah, the whitetail thing is
that figured out.
Kind of my deal. Like, you know, I love hunting elk. You know, everything else, a goat, that was cool, a bear. But it's like when it comes to whitetails, you know, I would love to go hunt mule deer and spend some time out of state other places. Right. But the problem is I just can't. It's like I dedicate my November to.
So is that's your number one?
Yeah.
If you had to pick one hunt out of the year, it'd be November, late season whitetail.
Yeah, whitetail for sure. Yep. And so that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I spend a lot of time, like I'm over there in October scouting, looking around. And, you know, I've been doing it for 14 years now. And so it's kind of one of those things that I've spent enough time that I have several spots that are like my go-tos that I know I can go and kill a buck and, you know, or get a buck on camera.
Right.
And so whether I kill him or not, that's another story, but I feel like I can go in and find a deer.
And I think you said, how many cameras do you put out preseason?
Well, it depends. Usually we run about 7 and then depending on what we're doing, might be a few more here and there. And so,
right.
You know, I mean,
so you've got a good game plan. You know where some of the, you know, your number 1, number 2, your shooter bucks are preseason.
Exactly.
You're not just going in and sitting blind. You got your areas picked out.
I've got them picked out, you know, and I've spent a lot of time with my dad too, you know, hiking ridges and canyons and, you know, looking for, you know, bucks and sign, and we'll look for some, you know, scrapes and then, you know, rub lines and that type of thing. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it, you know, as far as like trying to find a bigger buck, you know, sure, you could probably go over and shoot a 1.5, 2.5 year old buck pretty easy, but it's like when it comes to those mature bucks that are 4.5 plus, trying to find some of those in like their bedroom, that's the key. Is you got to get in where those bucks live, and
still, even though it, I think how many hours do you typically spend in the stand every year?
It depends, anywhere between probably 50 and 80 hours in a tree.
Right.
And then, so like 2 years ago, I spent 121 hours in the tree before I killed one. And so, 13 days, and so, and that's the thing is like I get in an hour before daylight and I hike in, get in my tree, and I sit until dark. And it's a 10.5 hour day. And I don't get out of the tree. I take a like 40, I think I have like a 46 or 8 ounce Nalgene, and I take that to pee in the tree. Yeah. But I don't get out. I just sit there and it's like, you got to stay all day. And those big bucks during the rut, it's kind of one of those things, like it seems like the best activity is between 10 and 2 and midday. Yeah.
So do you have cell service where you're at?
No.
So what are you doing in that tree? You're just scanning the horizon.
Yeah, just looking
the whole time.
Yeah, just looking. And it's hard sometimes not to fall asleep. No cell service, can't watch YouTube videos or anything like that. So or talk to anyone. So it's a long day.
A book, anything?
Yeah. So some guys I know they take a book and they'll read a book.
Sure.
My thing is like I want to be ready. And so it's like, dude, and one of the things I really got into the last couple years here is self-filming. Okay. And so like depending this year, was the first year I've ever sat in a ground blind. But the previous years, I have a Muddy camera, or Muddy Outdoors. They make a camera arm and I have it attached to the tree. And so I've really got into that and like filming everything. And so that keeps me pretty occupied because I'm filming.
And you're getting other critters coming through and smaller bucks. It's not just like, 120 hours before a buck comes through and you kill it.
I mean, you're generally seeing, a few does or fawn or like smaller bucks, that type of thing, squirrels and, whatever else. And so like you're kind of occupied. But the thing for me is it's like, it's a long day and it can test your patience sometimes. And I've had days, this year was actually kind of the worst, but I've had days where I've never seen a deer. And that's the hard one, is when you haven't seen a deer and you're thinking, man, I got to go out and do another 10 hours tomorrow.
It'd be hard to get up the next day and go do that.
Yeah.
Again.
And like climb back in the same stand.
Yeah.
And so the thing is with like a lot of guys like back in the Midwest and that type of thing, don't hunt your same stand 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, because the scent, they'll smell you, My philosophy is a little different, mainly because we hunt mountains. We're not hunting, cornfields and that type of thing where the wind here is always screwed up. I don't care, what it is. And so it could be a nice day, but the wind is going all over. It's just a little breeze, but it's blowing north, south, east, west, who knows. And these mountain bucks, they don't hang out in the same spot. They're traveling around between draws looking for does. Mm-hmm. The one thing you do run into is if he gets on a hot doe and gets in lockdown, like you might not see him and you're just sitting there waiting. And that is when things can get real boring real fast. Sure. But it just depends. Like if you want to kill that deer and that's the only deer, like, and I've done that the last few years, I've found a buck and that is the buck I'm killing. And I'll hunt that deer. And it's like, if I don't, get him, I'm eating my tag. And like, I've like set myself up for that. And that's kind of how it is.
And that's what it takes. I mean, it really does. And that's with everything, not just whitetail, but being willing to eat your tag and just sacrifice, put in all those hours and time and know it's going to take longer than you probably like.
Exactly. But, and, my biggest buck back in 2013 was kind of what started all that. And it was like that deer I had on camera, and I had him on camera for like 18 straight days. And like I had found his bedroom. And so it was like he was living there and he'd wander off, and go check does, but he was back and he would live there. And that was his spot. And I knew, I was just like, it's a matter of time. Sure. I'm killing this buck. And so, and my big thing is storms. So a lot of guys, it's like they go over and the big snowstorms coming in, they're like, typically animals don't move in the storms. I don't know what it is about those big mature whitetails, but it's like, dude, if a storm's coming, a big snowstorm, and say it's been cold, because most of the time when I'm over there, it's in the 20s or low 30s, and I'm sitting in the tree all day in that, and so it's like, it's a long day and it's cold. And, but those big bucks, if you can get a snowstorm to roll in, he will more than likely be out that day. If he hasn't been
You're
out,
talking like right before the storm.
or that, or
during
during or after. Like,
Yeah.
but my best, it's like just, so my biggest one in 2013, it had been dry. And it was like, not rain, but like little like flurries here and there for a few days of snow. But just, I'm talking like trace and like nothing to even amount on the ground, just barely enough to, on a leaf here and there, there's little snow,
Right.
And so I sat in the stand for 5 days straight. And on the 6th day, a storm was supposed to roll in. Well, that day about noon, it started snowing. And it started dumping pretty good. And the temperatures started dropping. And even more, and I was like, this is it. And that day, I think was the most deer I've ever seen. I think I've seen like 13 deer that day total. And I had it's a really kind of unique spot. I mean, I haven't found another one like it ever since. But it's kind of it's a bench in some big timber. And then a hill runs up, and there's a big canyon and a big draw, and the hill runs up probably in the canyon about 1.5 miles. So it's got a lot of country behind it. But this kind of flat down in there, and I think the deer come down in on that flat right there and rut. And when we first found it, there was just 2 scrapes that were like 4 to 5 feet circles, and right within about 40 yards of one another. And I was like, well, that looks pretty good. And so it's kind of one of those things, like, we threw a couple cameras out, and boom, we started having bucks showing up. And it was like, all right, there's some good bucks running around here, let's throw a stand up. Well, once we did that, and then there was rubs all over the place too. And so it was kind of one of those things that we knew bucks were hanging out, and
Right.
it must be a rutting area.
Right.
And so like these does come down in there and they hang out in this flat, and the bucks come down in and like chase them around in this flat. And I say flat, it's probably like 150 yard, like kind of out and maybe 100 yards wide. So it's not huge, but it's in the timber, and it's just a big flat in the timber, a big bench. And then the hill canyon drops off, bails, and pretty steep, and it keeps going down for another couple miles. And so it's just like this spot that's like unique, and these deer like come down on this bench and like chase each other around on this bench, and then they go back up on the hills in bed. But it's like they rut on that bench. And it's kind of one of those things. I mean, it took us like 8 years to even find that spot. So, I mean, like we spent a lot of years over there before we found that.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just went over and found that spot.
Sure.
And so anyways, that kind of sucked. But once we found it, it was like, okay, like we're good to go. And so that big buck, though, I had like 5 or 6 bucks running around and a bunch of does, and they were chasing each other all around in this snowstorm. And I was like, maybe my big dude will be out. And so I was just kind of like one of those things that we'd spent so much time that, he's going to make an appearance.
Right.
And so I kept sitting there. And well, anyways, as this snow's falling, I just thought to myself, there's got to be a trigger that we're missing all these other years that I'm not picking up on, and that gets these big bucks out of their bed. And all of a sudden I like looked up, and it was like 3:30, and I see this deer, and he's about 80 yards. And I grabbed my binoculars and threw him up, and I see his head tick back, and he was like licking a branch, like a licking branch. Sure. And I see these big tines, and I was like, that's him. And it was like one of those things, like, this is happening, Well, then he comes out, and all the other deer just like scatter. I mean, they're running everywhere. And the bucks, because like he's the dominant buck.
Yeah,
he's there.
yeah.
And so I grabbed my bow, and I wasn't filming at this time, and I'm ready. Well, he walks by at like 35 yards, and I'm like, man, should I shoot right there? And it was kind of one of those things, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I should shoot, and I'll be honest, I got buck fever and just froze up. And it's like, I talked to my buddy on the elk situation.
Sure.
I think I did that on that guy, because I didn't even draw my bow. And so then he runs over and chases a doe, and he's up on this hill, and he's flying up through the trees. Well, I only got until about 4:30, and then, so I got like an hour, and like, if he doesn't come back, I'm done. Well, then he goes over and starts making a rub after he comes back from her. Made a rub, went and checked a scrape, and now he's circling his way in towards my stand, and I'm sitting by like this big scrape. And so he's checking all these, and I'm thinking, dude, he's going to walk over to this big one. Like, I got him. And so he starts making a rub and made another rub, and then came in, hit the scrape, and then he walks in the one right next to my tree. And he's 15 yards.
Holy smokes.
And I'm like, dead. Like, I got him. So I go to draw my bow, and I can't draw my bow. Like, I am cold, and I'm like froze up from being cold. My muscles don't want to work. And then buck fever. And so I can't draw my bow. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so
were you shaking?
Yeah.
It was
like
that.
everything. Yeah. And so I'm like freaking out. And I try to draw my bow back. And I can't. Well, he hears me. And he kind of like spooked, and like his feet kind of went out like he was going to run, but he just stopped. But now he's on full alert. Well, he looks away from me, looking towards the hill. And I don't know why, don't know what, but like something, and he should have been looking up at me, but I don't think he realized where the sound came from. So I did the old point to the sky and just
whatever it takes,
whatever it
get
takes,
this thing pulled back,
and just rip my bow back. And I just swung down like as fast as I could right on him, because I knew he would hear that.
Yeah,
and he did. And I just swung down right on him. As soon as my 20 pin hit him, it was like mid body, because you're shooting out of the tree, so it's kind of like you got to think about that angle,
steep angle.
Yeah, and my stands are up there a ways anyways. I put them at 25 feet. So, I mean, they're up there. Most guys only go like 17 to 20. So, I mean, mine are up a little high. But anyways, so this buck, I don't even really remember my pin settling. It was just like it crossed him, and I pulled it, and let it go. Yep. Well, then he ran like 40 yards and died. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me, And so after that, that's when the addiction really kind of started.
Yeah. What year was that?
2013.
13. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'd killed a couple before that. Well, I've killed, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 before him, but nothing like big like him. And then it was kind of like, once I got him, then like it really kicked in,
The addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I started spending more time and started scouting some new areas, and then hoping that he had spread some of his genetics. Well, it's like, that spot, for whatever reason, it was good. Yeah. And it was like the one spot I can go to, throw cameras out, and I'd have a big buck there every year, or 2 or 3, and like shooters, and multiple little bucks. And, so it was kind of like my go-to. And so the next year I drew a mule deer tag here in Washington, didn't get a hunt. And then in 2015, I went back to that same spot. Well, my dad had hunted my tree. He went and hunted my tree when I have a mule deer tag.
Oh, yeah. And how'd he do?
He actually shot a pretty good buck. And one of our ones that, I was hoping would grow up, and it grew up, but I was hoping to give it another year, but he didn't care. And so anyways, it's still a big mature deer. And so anyways, we had that. And then 15, I went back to the same tree. And I had like 4 bucks there that were all just big shooters. And anyways, and that was the year I ended up spending 121 hours in the tree before I killed one. And that kind of gave me a new perspective of, man, I need some patience. Like, if this is what it's going to take to kill a big buck, like maybe I got lucky on 6 days, but if I'm going to have to wait like
13 days,
Oof. Every year, like this could get old. And anyways, but I did it.
But I think you quickly figured out that's what it takes.
Yeah.
I mean, because realistically, Washington isn't known for, we got some great whitetail.
Yeah.
In certain parts of the state. We got some great whitetail. But it's not like I think more guys, especially over here, nobody really thinks about giant whitetail in Washington.
No.
They kill some, but, around the Palouse, but not the big giant mountain whitetail.
Yeah.
Like not out of cornfields, not out of ag fields. It's just in the mountains.
In the mountains.
Yep. And
that's where they live. And, there's definitely some good bucks, and that's kind of the thing. It's just, there's some other guys, Dan Staten kills,
nice mountain.
He kills
whitetail every year.
Some real nice ones every year. And, and so he's one guy that I kind of always looked at before, because he was killing them. And I was like, dude, I want to get like him and kill him,
Yeah.
And then, so that was kind of one of my things. There's some other guys that I know that are consistent, killers. And they're always killing some big bucks. And so it took me a while to figure out what exactly they were doing or looking for. I think was the big thing is like what some of those guys are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And once I found what I needed to find, to like, this is a good spot, like that one stand, then it made it easier to go find some other spots.
More places.
Yeah. Because I knew what I was after.
Yep.
And now I've kind of got that in. But this year, I had a buck last year. I called him the web buck, and he was 2.5 years old. But he was already like 135, 140 inch deer at 2.5.
Holy smokes.
And I was like, dude, this year, I was like, if he comes back at 3.5, he just had those genetics that this guy's going to be like a 200 inch deer. And I was like, if he comes back, he's going to be hard not to shoot, but he's only going to be 3.5. And I don't know if I want to kill him. Well, anyway, so I go back to my favorite tree, set up my cameras. Dude, nothing. Just 2 little dink bucks is all I had. And we put the cameras out in the end of October, and then November 27th, we came home, and there was 2 dinkers. And I was like, wow, like what happened?
That's when you start thinking wolves.
Yeah. And that was weather.
Something kill them.
Yeah. And, there was some cats running around, but we heard some wolves howl this year. And it was kind of one of those things like, all right, maybe they've made their way here.
Yeah.
And now we're in trouble. And so I don't know, and the weather was kind of weird this year. It snowed early and then started warming up. And I think that we had a weird thing happen this year. Like usually the later the season goes, the more deer and more bucks you see on your cameras. And it was reversed this year. And
colder started early, faded to warm.
And then it faded to warm.
Yeah.
And it was 57 degrees one day when my dad went and got in the stand. And that doesn't cut it.
No.
I mean, like for whitetail, you need cold weather.
Yeah.
And so all of our deer literally vanished off the cameras. It just sucked. But this year, I mean, I only hunted a day and a half. I mean, I hunted one full day, got completely soaked. I've never been wet in the tree before, ever. And this year I got in the tree. It was melting snow, soaked through 4 layers of clothes by midday. And I sat there until dark, but it was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done because I was literally shaking like it was cold. And then got out of the tree. The next day, my dad goes, why don't you go sit in the ground blind? Because we have 2 ground blinds. My sister started hunting with us a few years ago. And she doesn't like climbing a tree, so she wanted to sit in the ground blind. I'm like, nah, not my thing. I was like, oh, no, not in the ground blind, and just, I've fought them ever since my dad started using them. And I was like, I'll go sit in the tree. Well, it was supposed to rain. And I was like, man, I really don't want to get wet. And so it was kind of one of those things. And so I had a buck on that camera that I wanted to hunt. And we called him the bladed buck because he just has like this huge bladed brow tine. And I actually have pictures of his dad from some years past. And, he's identical. So it's kind of cool to see the genes passed down because,
right.
I mean, this dude looks just like his dad did like 5 years ago. And so it's kind of cool to see that the genetics passed through to different deer and being able to watch them grow. Well, I wanted to shoot this buck, and 3 days before season, he vanished. Never seen him again. And I'm like, I don't know if something got him or if he just decided like during the rut, if he went and found a hot doe somewhere and then ended up chasing another hot doe and he's who knows where.
Sure.
So I don't know where that buck went and he's gone. And so it kind of bummed me out. And I had another buck at this ground blind that we'd had on camera for like one night for like an hour and like passing through and then pass back through and like gone. And then 5 days went by and then he showed up again and then he left. And then he was back for like another hour or two passing. Just, I think it was outside of his core area, but he was just checking to see if does were around. And then he left for like 3-4 more days. Well, then season opened and we started hunting and he wasn't anywhere around, And so we literally had no shooters at that blind either. Well, my sister and dad are sitting in the other blind together because my dad's just helping my sister because she's new to hunting. And so I'm like, dude, I don't want to go sit in this blind. Like, I'm going to waste a day of hunting. I need to go back to the tree where at least a buck is, and I had one buck that I wanted to hunt. And anyways, well then, it was like, dude, I don't want to get wet. But that buck's not there. And I really don't want to shoot that buck because I have a buddy who has a stand up the canyon a ways, and he had that buck on camera.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, dude, I'm like, I don't want to shoot Matt's buck, because that's what he's after, And so I was like, well, you know what? I'll just go sit in the blind. I'm not going to see that buck anyways, so I don't have to worry about Matt. I don't have nothing. Like, we're good to go. And I'll just, maybe something else will come strolling through, or maybe my bladed buck will show back up.
Right.
Who knows? And so I get in the blind, sit there, had a doe and a fawn come through, and they left, and another doe and a fawn, probably the same one, came back in, and they left. Then all of a sudden, it's about 11 o'clock, and I see this doe go streaking down through the timber, down this hill, and out behind me. And I'm like, huh, that's kind of weird. I'm like, she's moving kind of fast. I was like, usually you don't move that quick unless there's a buck nearby. So I got my camera turned on and started filming and everything, and I'm watching her. And then she goes out of sight, so I shut it off. And I was like, she must be by herself, About as quick as I thought that, I hear this grunt. And I was like, oh, there's a buck. And I look up, and literally as quick as all that happened, I turned the camera back on and just hit record and just set it out straight in front of me, because I was like, it was there. Yeah. So I grabbed my bow and look up, and this buck's just cruising right in. And it was that one that my buddy had on camera, and that but he hadn't been there. So that doe must have been getting hot, and he was following that doe in.
Oh, right.
And so I literally just was like, well, I was like, yeah, I knew well, it took me a second. At first I didn't realize it was him. Like, I thought it was a different buck, because he has a split G4 on his left, and I didn't see that point on our trail camera, and so I thought it was a different buck because it just looked funny. I was like, dude, this guy's got way more points. And so I thought it was just a random buck showing up,
right.
And so it threw me off. And so anyways, I drew back, I shoot him, and then looked at the video, and that's when I realized, I was like, oh, that's that buck. And then I was like, oh, he has a split G4. And then, but it was kind of one of those things, like, it all happened so fast, and, it was like, no question in your mind, you're going to shoot him. But it was one of those things, as a whitetail hunter, you always hope for. Like, as I'm sitting in there, it's like, I know pretty much, I've done my homework, that I know what bucks are in the area, and my stands are spread out over probably a 10-mile area, maybe a little more. But it's mountains and draws, and, so I mean, it's a lot of country. And but I have a pretty good idea of what bucks are like covering that area.
Sure.
And so I'm always like, if a random buck shows up, he's coming from a long ways, because I kind of have that whole area locked down. And my dad the way he always put it to me, with it's elk hunting or deer hunting or whatever, hunt a small area well rather than a big area poorly. And so I like it. We've always took that tactic into this deer thing and covered that area really good. So we know, like, these bucks are here. And so it's kind of one of those things. But as a whitetail hunter during the rut, you always hope, man, maybe some giant random buck will just come strolling through and I'll kill him.
The phantom buck from nowhere.
The phantom. Yeah, he's a ghost, And so the Yeti and Bigfoot. And so it kind of was one of those things where I thought it was a different buck, and I was like, dude, it finally happened. Like, I finally got my random buck. Yeah. Until I watched that footage, and I was like, dang it.
We got him on camera.
Yeah, I was like, I got a few pictures, but I was like, that's Matt's buck. And so it was kind of one of those things, but
sure.
I mean, it's hunting, it is what it is. We're on public land. Mm-hmm. And so the thing is between my dad and my sister and I, and then Matt, we are kind of the only ones in this area. And so it's like, there are some other guys, that kind of stroll through, but they're more road hunters. And so they're just driving around looking, hoping they shoot one. And it's kind of one of those spots that it's like, I'm glad that, if I had a buck and he killed it, at least you killed it, because I know you do your homework and you put in a lot of hard work. And that's what he said to me, was that at least you killed it. And not some random dude just driving around and got lucky.
I happened to see it off the road.
Yeah.
I get that for sure.
So he was like, because I know you put in your time. So, and I was like, dude, if one of my bucks would have showed up at your stand, especially that bladed one, because he had my bladed one at his stand.
Oh, right.
And so I was like, I'd expect you to kill it, and he's like, yeah, it's hunting. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So it was cool. It's my second biggest whitetail I've killed. But I mean, he's
a tank.
He's a good buck.
It's a good buck.
I can't complain.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty big bucks in photos.
Yeah,
from you.
Yeah,
over the years.
Yeah, there's
like start thumbing back. Like, man, dang, he's got this figured out. This mountain whitetail thing, he's really got it figured out. So
yeah. It's
pretty cool.
It's my favorite thing. I mean, like I said, my big thing is I got to do it with my dad.
Well, now you've got your goat under your belt.
Yep.
You're going to refocus on just mountain whitetail.
I know. That's my thing.
What's your next, what's the bucket list now?
I think a moose.
Moose, yeah.
I'd like to go kill a moose, and that's my thing. I'd like to go back up to BC maybe and hunt with those guys and
Same
kill
guys.
moose.
Yeah.
But, of course, it's all money, right?
That's all it is. It's just money.
Yeah, if I had plenty of it, I'd be up there every year, but I don't. So
that's what keeps us from doing so many things as hunters. Well, cool, man. You got some awesome stories. I'm glad I got to hear them. Yeah. I hear bits and pieces, as we talk, but I never got to hear the full thing. So it's cool hearing how everything's worked out, and appreciate you coming on and letting other guys, hopefully everybody else, pick something out of that and take something away from it. But great stories. Probably have to get you on for some more, because I'm sure we could go back and talk about previous hunts. And
we could do a lot. That was
just this year.
Yeah,
smokes.
That was just 1 year, but
it's got to be one of your better years.
Yeah, I think aside from probably 2008, 2013 when I killed my biggest whitetail, I killed my biggest bull.
Oh, and that's this guy here I'm looking at.
Yeah, and that was in Montana, in the same spot I killed this year.
Oh yeah.
So 13 was a pretty good year. I killed my biggest buck and bull, but then we've got a couple other. 2008 I killed 2 caribou and a bull and a buck, but it's one of those things. This year was kind of, I probably put in more work in like preparing and everything, and so it felt more rewarding than
that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah,
all that prep work and time spent, whether it's working out or eating or shooting, all those things. It's just, once you've done all that and committed yourself to doing it and getting yourself right, when it all pans out at the end of the season, it's kind of hard to explain, but it feels so much better, right?
Yeah,
because you earned it.
Exactly.
You didn't just go out and it happened, but you earned it. You put in the time, so almost like you deserved it. So
you feel like you put in all that hard work, and it's not like you deserve the animals, but in a way it is. It's like, dude, I've put in, and I mean, anyone that knows me could contest to that. It's like that I put in so much work, whether it be in the gym. I mean, it's like I work all day, go to the gym for an hour and a half, come back and work till 10 or 11 at night, like every week. And then it's like I'm working and I'm working out, and then I'm shooting, and it's like doing all the things I should be doing. So it's like when I go hunt, I feel like I've put in my time. So
it's just fitting that you get rewarded, with something that that's what you were going for at the end of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Well, where can guys find you? Check out your stuff. I know probably folks would like to see some of those critters we just talked about.
Yeah, they can. My Instagram is probably my most updated one, at Jon Gabrio, so JonGabrio. And then a lot of my work and stuff is at apexadvertising.co, just CO. So if you guys are looking for any work or anything or whatnot, and then I also have a link on my Instagram. But
perfect.
Yeah, they can go see some pictures on my Instagram. Try to keep that updated, and I try to just keep it mainly hunting, so I'm not boring people with regular life stuff. So
that's what Facebook's for.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Jon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, guys, hope you enjoyed that story. If you're interested in what we have coming up in the new year, please take note. Coming on Monday, we have a very interesting podcast on what you all have so many questions about, testosterone. If you want more information on our new program, the Testosterone Project, launching in January, please go to huntharvesthealth.com/testosterone project to learn more about your mind, your muscle, your motivation, and your mojo.